All right. This is me, Tickles. You're listening to the TMC podcast. We are a movie club. It is like a book club, but with movies. And today we are talking about Dazed and Confused. And I am joined by two very esteemed hosts. I just realized that they have 189 episodes in. Really, really excited to welcome Chloe and Eliana from Girls Gone Canon here to the stream today. Eliana, Chloe, thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks so much for having us. Tommy, we are so excited to be here, especially for this film.
Oh my God. Well, you know, it's really, I'm lucky to have you guys. I've been a listener of your guys' podcast for, quite a while. Ironically, I don't know how they line up time-wise. I discovered it through listening to Maester Monthly and hearing Eliana on Maester Monthly. And she was talking about Girls Gone Canon. And so I flipped over there, and that's how I was turned on to you. Tell the listeners who may not be familiar with Girls Gone Canon a little bit about your show and yourselves.
Well, so Girls Gone Canon, Eliana and I did fall in love with each other and create a podcast child called Girls Gone Canon, Canon. And we are currently reading 2 book series. We are working through the His Dark Materials series, which was our second series we started. And our first series was the A Song of Ice and Fire series, where we go through each point of view character by only their chapters at a time. So we read all of John at a time. We read all of, right now it's Catelyn at a time.
Which I love that concept. There are a few different podcasts out there that do the rereads or the chapter by chapter analysis. Some really, really good ones. But doing it character by character is, again, it was something that I remember as I'm reading the books thinking, like, I wonder if anyone's done this. If anyone's just, I'm sure someone has if I'm thinking that. And then finding out that there was a podcast for that. So I was like, holy shit, this is a very nice little cosmic giggle. And then turns out it's a really, really good podcast run by 2 very brilliant people. So thank you again. I sound like a broken record. Thank you for coming on. And like I said in the intro, congratulations on 189 episodes. That's pretty mind blowing as someone this is our 13th episode of the TMC podcast. So lucky number 13. Yep. So we got a ways to go before we catch up, and hopefully we never do. Today's movie, though, as I said, Dazed and Confused. People who may not be familiar to the premise of the TMC podcast, we have guests. The movies that we choose are actually elected by our guests and then are voted on by you, the listeners. So this was Chloe's pick. It won. Chloe, tell us, why you chose this movie. I think there's a lot of obvious reasons, but what is it about this movie that resonates with you?
Listen, man. Earlier I was reading some of Slater from the movies, just some of his quotes, and I was reading a couple of interviews with him, and I was reading almost every other word he says is man, and I'm like, oh, man, he got me, man. I remember watching this with my dad. My dad is huge on classic rock. He loves getting the Zepp out. That was, as a kid, I knew that. As a kid, I stole his Cinderella mixtape, audio tape. I thought that was Cinderella because I was a kid. I'm like, oh, that's not Cinderella.
No, this does not sound like a princess.
In some languages, maybe. I just I loved classic rock with my dad. Like, that was something growing up I'll always remember, and watching this movie with him, I will always remember, besides the obvious man. I just think that it's such a timeless premise, right? Like for something that was released in 93, but actually is taking place in 76, they still captured that time period. And I think that's kind of one of the root theses of the movie is like the premise and childhood and coming to age and all of these awful like bullying, physical abuse, harm, all this crap that you deal with or shouldn't have to, but that these kids go through. It's a timeless coming of age thing. All these teenagers going to one event and that event meaning freedom in whatever way it means to that tiny teenage vessel of flesh. You know, I remember being a teenager once.
Oh my God. Yeah, no. And I think that's part of the popularity of this film, right? Is that, it takes place in the 70s, but if anyone who's gone to high school already has probably people in their lives that they relate to these characters, right? They maybe dressed a little bit differently, or talked a little bit differently, but ultimately these people remind you of someone, and that invokes this feeling of nostalgia. And we're going to talk a lot about that a little bit later here. Eliana, where does this movie kind of like sit with you? Was it on your radar? Is it something you really liked or enjoyed, or is it something that maybe you had seen but were just meh on?
Yeah, I had seen it before, but like a really, really long time ago, probably around the time like that I was of a similar age as some of the people in this movie. So, but I never really revisited it, though I had seen like interestingly Slacker later on, and I didn't ever connect that. Oh, so that's the same director. Right. Now I see it. Yeah. Austin, Texas.
Right.
And it's not as like meaningful to me as it is to Chloe, but I also am like, it's a fun movie. It's very chill, and it's also very much a classic, right? Like so many of these lines are things that like, people quote all the time. My partner is very excited that we are covering Dazed and Confused. He's all like, oh my God, all these lines are like, I love all these lines. It's so quotable, like, and very, very jazzed. So.
And it is super quotable. And, I think that, and not trying to step on the toes of something we're going to get to a little bit later, I think it is an interesting thing because depending on when you watch it or when you're exposed to it, and when you do these rewatches, you're finding yourself relating with different, characters or different cast members potentially. I know when I first saw it, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I graduated went on to high school. So 96, I was an 8th grader. Or, so 95, 96, I was an 8th grader. So 3 years, I was kind of relating more to Mitch's character, and now going back, I don't know that I relate to, but I'm looking back more so and reflecting on my own high school experience versus the expectation of what high school is to be. And then, my other question, just really quickly before we move on to some of our categories is, it's definitely a teen movie, right? I think we'd all agree that this is a teen movie. Is this a stoner movie?
In some parts, some scenes, but I mean, not all. I mean, some people have classified it as horror. Did you know that? Some people relate it as a horror movie in some aspects because the hazing.
100%. Yeah, I have a note in that. Yeah, I right. No, there was some creepy, but the reason I asked the question is I grew up kind of associating this as a stoner flick. As a kid, Dazed and Confused, the 70s, Slater was the character I think that jumped off.
That's just rock and roll, man. That's right, what it is, though. That's what it is. Because my dad is devil's lettuce. Like, do not bring it near me. It's awful.
Oh,
like,
really?
If anyone near me smoked it, I would be so disappointed in you. And maybe there's some sort of stigma for me. We won't get into that now. But
he's into the classic rock scene.
And that's rock and roll, man. And I'll call him out. Like, he loves Clapton. Clapton's his favorite. And I'll put cocaine on and I'll be like, interesting, that's your favorite song, Dad, because I'm really surprised in you good Christian man. And he's like, that's just rock and roll, man. That's just how it is. And I'm like, okay, Dad, whatever that means. He was a track star, if that helps. He's kind of a nerd, but a sweet nerd, a handsome nerd. Good for him.
Yeah, good. I mean, there's nothing. No, I think some of the best characters in this movie are nerds. Eliana, is it a stoner flick in your eyes?
I don't. That's such a good question because I feel like I take it for granted in that like same as you. I've always kind of thought of it as one, but at the same time I'm like, but I mean it is and it isn't. It's both, right? Like it isn't. I don't think of it as like Pineapple Express, right? I don't think of it like same as that. And like when I think Pineapple Express, I'm like that's a stoner movie, right? But there's a lot of people smoking weed in this, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a stoner movie. Like when we think of characters we relate to most, I didn't smoke like that much weed in high school. I didn't start until like much later, like senior year, I guess, of high school. But I guess I relate most to Slater, but I'm not very much like that. I just think of myself as a buffoonish person. So that's who I am. I'm out there being like, yeah, you guys, George Washington is into aliens.
No, it is weird because I certainly, I think that was one of the things that I was, questioning on some of these rewatches, and probably speaks more so to how far the stigma has moved on marijuana. Today, viewing this in 2021, where it's legal in so many states, and on a recreational level, maybe it just seemed more casual. Whereas a kid growing up in a state where it's legal now, but it wasn't legal when I watched it the first time. It was, and the flip side. So Chloe, my parents were very much classic rock scene, but they still party. Like they had me at 22 and they partied well through my childhood.
21 and they party, but my dad doesn't party that.
No, I mean, some of the stories I found out later on in life that was, luckily kind of oblivious to, but I mean, like you brought up the Eric Clapton song, that was rocking in our house, when I was a kid, and I had no clue. So like, to me, it was a weird, like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is when I watched this, I remember watching it with my parents and how accurate they felt a lot. They were seniors in 1977. These are class of 76. So, I just remember different scenes where they were kind of like, yep, like the scene where the girl's having her zipper pulled up, with the wrench. My mom was like, yes, we used to have to do that. We used to have to do the like that's how we zippered our pants. And there was a lot of that where they just kind of nodded along. Like clearly it was authentic to them, being people who graduated at high school at this time. And, they weren't in Texas, but it just seems like a very universal experience of that time. Yeah. And I just find it very interesting, to question whether or not this is truly a stoner movie rewatching it. Let's get into the hazing aspect, because you bring up how some people categorize it as a horror film. There was an author of a book called All Right, and she was in an interview with a bunch of the people who actually went to school with Richard Linklater, because he wrote, this is based a lot on real experience that he had in going to high school in Texas, and these women were talking about how they looked through at this experience as a trauma event. And it is a huge part of the film. Was hazing something you guys experienced in your school, whether high school, college, at any level?
Not really hazing on like the terms. I mean, I was bullied very intimately by girls that were very manipulative, which can be a form of hazing, but I just feel it was such a more intimate experience for everyone involved that it just like, I don't qualify it as this type of hazing. However, it pretty much, it is in a manner, like in a broad categorization, right? It's a hazing to belong to a group treatment of how, especially girls, as you see, like, I mean, the guys, yeah, they got the beating and then they ran. The girls were subjected to humiliation, degradation, and a little bigger expansion that we'll talk about. So I didn't deal with like on a broad scale that kind of humiliation, but like definitely like, just mean girls in the group who don't like you, and they will make it known that they are better than you by doing mean things to you or by embarrassing you over a long period of time. And the amount of time you subject yourself to that and how much you're willing to put up with of that is like showing if you're in or not. And I don't know.
Sometimes that's worse than just, short, brief, like you'd almost rather get it over in like a day, right? Yeah. Where you're just, hey, okay. And then let's take me out later and we can have some beers and be cool. What about you, Eliana? Was it something you faced at your school?
Not during like these kinds of ages, right? Like when I was bullied, it was in elementary school, and it wasn't hazing, it was more bullying. And I have the good fortune of being so, I guess out of it that I didn't realize I was being bullied until I was an adult looking back on it. And my mom was like, yeah, we had to like talk to the vice principal and stuff. Like about what was happening to you. And I was like, oh wow, really interesting. I'm just so pure. Or I just compartmentalize all of my trauma. Whatever.
One of the two.
But like you know, by the time I got into, you know, where I went to school and stuff, by the time I got into middle school and high school, all of the messaging of the 90s of like, you are all cool and special really paid off for me. That I was the person who benefited from that. So
thanks, Dazed and Confused.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and like, yeah, there wasn't really any, I guess, hazing. Maybe there probably was for like certain organizations, right? Like when I was in college radio, maybe when we had our like interns, or when I was an intern, we'd be like, oh, we're gonna have you like have a drink, but people didn't have to do it. They wanted, you know, like, and it was like one, it's like, hey, let's hang out, but, you know, it's not, yeah. So I was never like in that sort of situation, but
well, and it's interesting that in one of the interviews, I think Richard Linklater talks about how, you know, he had friends who went on to college, and they talked about the hazing they experienced there, and they talked about it as if it was like, you know, some of the best times of their lives, you know, and just talking about the spectrum of, you know, the experience and how it's viewed, I think it was kind of interesting, you know, and I'm sure there's probably a lot more or deeper you could go on that. But I did think it was interesting that it seemed, at least seemingly to me, when I first, you know, on these couple rewatches, that the hazing that the boys and the girls went through seemed to me to be, you know, somewhat or pretty different, or, you know, diametrically opposed. And Eliana, you had a really interesting point where it was they were both kind of sexualized, and I didn't see the girls as you know, their hazing as sexualized, but when you pointed it out, it just seemed very clear. Do you want to talk about that just a second? Because I thought it was an excellent point, just really smart.
Yeah, I mean, this is going off of stuff that Chloe was also saying, right, in terms of the emasculation and the infantilization, right, how that plays out. But like, you can see that it both is very, again, sexual in nature, just differently so for how the boys and the girls experience it, right? Like for the boys, it has to do with like there's that thing going on where like you are spanking someone. Like that's sexual no matter how you kind of put it.
Yeah,
and like
it's not subtle at all.
Yeah, and like how that power is like exerted over you know, the boys' bodies. But for the girls, it's like at first it seems kind of silly in terms of the like squirting of the, I guess, condiments and then the flour and then making them do stuff. But then when you have them like go up to the guys and be like, will you marry me, right? And then like one of them, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, there's many characters, more than A Song of Ice and Fire.
I also had a hard time keeping track of that. I actually have a tab with the characters over here. I normally
Thankfully I have a book.
Oh my god!
I'm normally really good at this, but I'm glad you said that, because I've had a really hard time keeping the characters, you know, keeping track of them as well.
I've been like going back and forth. I'm like, I got this one. No, this one turns out I don't have this one.
It's is it Pinkerton to the girl, and he's a total asshole to her, and he's like, oh, you do anything, show me the back of your mouth. Yeah,
that one. Yeah, so that one's sexual-ish, and like the fact that they have to respond with like anything you want. Right. All of that. It's that, and it reminds me of like this. I assume she went through this. This girl in my creative writing class in college, who I think went through hazing, probably in joining her sorority, and talking about like they had to stand. Maybe this was made up. Maybe she was going off of some other trope, but you know, the idea of like the girls standing naked, right, and people like drawing them in Sharpies with like all of their imperfections or whatever. So it's a little like that.
No, well, I mean, I'm having a lot of my guy friends who went to fraternities and pledge. A lot of their stories are super homoerotic. You know, just being totally honest, it's just really blatantly homoerotic, and it's kind of, you know, it's sometimes you wonder if you know, they're framing it as like the best times of their lives, just to kind of, I don't know,
trauma.
Yeah, it's the spoonful of sugar, you know, helps medicine go down a little bit.
Well, I noticed this time, this watch through, I mean, the way that Ben Affleck is like on the kid when he's about to paddle him, and it's like a conquest, and it's majorly homoerotic, and it's totally about dominance, and it's totally about control. And for like for both of them, but in different ways, right? Because for men, like that is like being weaker, is being subjected to physical pain and showing you can bear it. And men, a lot of men, like stereotypically, you're looked at as not being, if you're emotional, if you're weak, then you're prey. You're preyed upon. And that's exactly what it was. It was a hunt. It was a straight up hunt. And so like you think about it at these levels and you hear this level of hazing happen like to your friends that join frats or sororities. So it also becomes a form of like blackmail. So you just think about it. If that's just like the tip of your relationship iceberg, if I just get bullied at Cinderella the Musical by 8th grade girls because I told them they were posers, they were. If I get bullied for that, just to get into that friend group, like when you go up, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah. Name 5 of the mouses if you're a real Cinderella fan.
Exactly.
There are 5 mice.
Gus.
This
This is a whole nother episode.
I thought there were like 3. Anyways, yeah, that's true. That's a different movie. I will say, trying to keep track. Speaking of keeping track of, I have this question that I really need to bring it up. Speaking of keeping track of the characters, right? And keeping track, I guess, of mice. They were all like saying, like, we want all the kids, we want all the boys to line up, and if you all line up and all take your paddle, we'll only give you one versus like several. And I'm like, how do they know? How did they know which kid got paddled and which one didn't? Like, how are they keeping track?
I chalk this up to like small town Texas, right? There's like that class has like 13 boys, right? And 5 of them have brothers or sisters that are at the high school, and those are the 5 that they're really trying to like drill into. And the reason I say that is, so I mentioned, I was in 8th grade not long after this movie came out. One of our big fears was that we were going to be hazed. We played sports. I think that within the sports community, that sort of stuff is even more likely. It's kind of fratty in high school. It's like, maybe the frat of high schools. And we really didn't experience it much when we were freshmen. What we had is kind of in a different way than what you guys are explaining, because football is such a physical sport. These, we were, when we have a chance to play against the seniors or the juniors as a JV player, they would just take shots at you that were, cheap or in some cases legal, but just they knew that they had a very definitive physical advantage over you, right? So it was. And I related to that a lot, in some of the scenes with Jason London and Mitch Wiley, where, it's like the cool senior, because there were guys who were like that, who would be like, hey, don't worry about that dude. He's a fucking asshole, and they'd kind of help you up, and they were cool about it. And there were other guys who were more like the Ben Afflecks, who were out there to just destroy little kids. So, it wasn't. But on the flip side, and this is like, it is interesting watching this movie because my biggest takeaway, I went to a small Catholic school. I felt like, and I went to college to play sports, but I went to, it was a weird thing. The kids I played with in high school were kids I grew up with in grade school. So for the most part, I knew these kids. These were my best friends. When I went to college, I didn't know these guys. And I never understood the stereotype of like a meathead athlete, for the most part, because, it being so small, with the exception of some, a couple older guys, a lot of the kids, it's like if you played football, you were also in theater, you're also a pothead, you were also, like you crossed so many lines, and it was so blurred and so muddied at that time, that I felt like to a certain degree, like I didn't get it. And then when I got to college, I was like, oh, I kind of get that stereotype. I totally get those, those people exist 100%. So yeah, I mean, but I did look at it like, holy shit, viewing it as an adult, like a 39-year-old man, was I an asshole? Was I more of an asshole than I even thought I was? Just looking at some of the stuff, I like to think that I was more Jason London than Ben Affleck, but it is a weird thing, so looking through it through a critical lens. But the reason I'm asking myself, am I an asshole? So my brother was a freshman when I was a senior, and this is like 100%. And I asked the question in the thing, and I said, do you guys think this rekindled hazing in the 90s? And Eliana, I'm assuming that's you that said, I don't know, I was a baby.
I wasn't a baby, but I was definitely like a child, and I wasn't paying attention.
So
I don't really know. I mean, like obviously there were stories about hazing, but I wasn't like paying attention.
So 1,000%, me and my friends would have never done this had we not seen Dazed and Confused. We made paddles. And we didn't paddle all the freshmen, right? We didn't go like we didn't do it like you would think. But my brother and his friends, who are our friends, were like, "Yo, freshmen, it's time to get paddled." And again, I keep referring to myself as the Jason London, and it's really hard for me not to say Jeremy London, but the Jason London of because when it came my turn, I gave him soft ones, but some of the guys did not. Some of our close friends did not, and I do feel I need to mention it because we have a listener. Probably, if he's not listening now, he'll tune in later. Dane, he still brings up how one of the guys like got him. It was like a Ben Affleck moment. It was like the dude just. They didn't get along, and these two guys, they're still in each other's lives, kind of in the same circles of friends. They still kind of dislike each other because of it. So, it's real life shit. It happened, and it's something in my life where I can see how an event like this could lead to 30 years later, 20 years later, people still having hard feelings or viewing it as a trauma event. It's just and to feel like you were a part of that. So, that's just my take. I did feel the need to admit that.
Is this Tommy's big, deep moment to admit his sins?
Well, here's the deal.
Are you feeling guilty? You sound a little guilty.
I do. Well, no, 1,000%. 1,000%. I was like, I can't talk about this show and talk about hazing and then leave out the fact that we hazed my brother and his friends. So Jono, Dane, Tommy Doherty, Ryan Salemi.
Oh, you're just
yeah. I'm throwing out names.
Are you gonna send them this video?
Sorry.
I think you should. I think you should.
I think so too.
Well, you should let them all paddle you. That's just
put it on your Insta and tag them. XOXO Gossip Girl.
That's fair. My wife's watching Gossip Girl probably right now over this live cast.
Not till tomorrow or Thursday.
Yeah, I was like, the new episode's not out yet.
Well, no, she might be catching up. Yeah, no, 1,000%. I will throw that invitation out, and I know Doherty will probably like and accept this. So Doherty, Salemi, Jono, and Dane, you guys all have the invitation to come on the TMC podcast and paddle me for an episode of your choice. So I'll put it out there like that.
This podcast got kinky. Wow.
Yeah,
this is
I do have to say, I know we're going to talk about some of our favorite scenes, but since you were, I don't know were you maybe instead of maybe not an O'Banion, I don't know.
You cut out there. I don't think I'm an O'Banion. Maybe
more of a Pickford.
No. Well, I was far from a Pickford. I mean, I guess Cole Benny, maybe a Benny. I guess.
Benny. Okay. Benny was a little softer.
Benny was really into it. Benny was like fucking drilling holes into the paddle so that it would go faster.
True. Maybe a poor. I mean, I don't know. There's no.
Is that you?
Well, I was more of a Michelle. I was the girl with the guitar. I brought the guitar to school. I
Mila
sat
Jovovich?
in the corner. Yeah, I was Mila Jovovich. That's who I was in this movie. Absolutely. I was a girl with the guitar that hanged out with the burnouts and the nerds. I was like a good mix of her and Cynthia. I was like also a little bit of the nerd. I floated though. Like you were talking about high school and how you didn't really feel it was that way in high school, looking back, reflecting maybe. And I got my license the moment I could when I turned 16, and I went to school at a technical center half the day. So I left, bought Taco Bell, and drove an hour and went to cosmetology school for 2 years. And my only other classes were radio and TV news. And that was it. That was my like junior, senior year. I think I had one semester of like a real class, but I got my science and my math and crap from that. So I lived the good dream. I didn't have to waste my time. And so I did that. So I was just like the girl in the cafeteria with the guitar on my back, or the girl you heard on the radio or on TV, but I was never there. So I didn't have to talk to anyone ever because my 2 classes had a select small group of people in them. It was great. So I didn't have a problem in high school. It was definitely middle school for me which is interesting. But the very beginning of high school, I also had old friends, like seniors and crap. So I avoided some of that.
Yeah, I think middle school's tough. I think
Middle
middle
school
school's brutal.
It's hard.
Yeah, middle
school is
school's
hard.
the worst. It's actually the
Sucks.
hardest, I think. Yeah, 100%.
I want to call out this comment from the live the little chat over here
Yeah,
from Dan Pepper saying, "My friends and me saw the movie, thought hazing the young kids sounded awesome, and then were too lazy to do it."
Yeah.
So I thought that needed to be brought into the conversation.
Yeah.
Mood.
Maybe we should have been more lazy. I don't know.
I didn't even like doing my homework or my chores or anything else. How was I going to do that?
I don't even get the energy to bully.
Eliana, who were you? Who were you in the movie?
I was
What did
also
you
a
like?
floater. I don't know that like any of me. I think closest like in spirit maybe is Slater, but I don't know that I'm any of these. No one was I was like I guess the artsy kid in
Yeah.
school, and also
Maybe
also
Sabrina?
the lead. And I don't know. All these people are 3D. You know,
Yeah.
where's all the 2D people? All right.
we need a little more 2D. It's one of the things about the hazing in the movie that I think is maybe a little hard to swallow, I guess, is like how implicit the community seems to be with it, right? And there is this like moment where Adam Goldberg's character is talking about that. He's like talking about how what the fuck where's the community? They just let this shit go on. Which is crazy to think about too, because it is this kind of meta comment. I think as a person, you're watching this and you're like, where are all the adults? Like, where are the teachers? They're doing this on school grounds, like it looks like that, at least with the hazing of the females. So and very much the 8th grade teacher, the kids are like, hey, okay, these guys are going to paddle the shit out of us. Can we sneak out the back? He's like, back in Nam, like here's the deal. There's this moment. I think it's very meta. And he talks about it. I just want to point that out. I thought that was an interesting thing, and it's interesting to consider that this was something that really did happen. Richard Linklater's drawing on his experience, so that means there really was a community where they really just kind of turned a blind eye on this. Again, Eliana, you brought up a good point. There was one parent who didn't, right? Tommy Houston's mom, who pulls out the shotgun.
That's our woman.
Yeah. She's. I mean, we do have a section for strongest performances. We probably should throw her in there because that was an awesome. Yeah, that was a really great. Probably maybe one of my favorite characters. Yeah, makes an impression. There's also a meta moment that I didn't pick. Obviously, I'm not a filmmaker, but Chloe, in the notes, you had brought up a really good just video. It's like a documentary on the making of. From Vulture, right? Is that what it was from?
Yep.
So in that,
well, there was that Melissa Mayer's piece that you talked about, which is the All Right, which is the audio history. And Vulture has a great couple snippets from that history, but there's also a making of documentary that I want to say it was extra content they made during filming. It got put together in the 90s, like mid-late for like I think it might have been actually 2000s. It might have been for the 10-year they put it together.
You're right, because there is a scene when they show the 10-year refill, like a viewing party at the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah, and those are great. I would recommend that if you have a way to get your hands on it and see it for sale. I would definitely get the Criterion Dazed and Confused because it is beautiful. My husband got it because it's one of our favorite movies, and it's got such a cool case. And not only that, but it comes with a great little booklet, really nice. And it has in the back, it has yearbook things. At the end, we'll look at a couple of them for fun. We'll pull our favorites. We'll each choose a character and get with it at the end. But they have a yearbook profile. It's so great. So I recommend it. But the cult following, like you guys brought up Slacker being the first film, the cult following that followed this, it was huge. It almost didn't happen, and it did. And sacrifices were made for it too. But man.
And they talk a lot about that in the documentary, which is if you can't get your hands on that Criterion copy, it is on YouTube. It's about 45 minutes. They talk about the difficulties making the film because it's kind of an independent film. It's kind of a studio film. It's like this mix between the two, and because it is, there was a lot of conflict, on the set. But, I'm talking about this other meta moment with the hazing, and, it's the director, Richard Linklater, talking about how it's, very much like the experience of him making his first studio film, which is kind of being bent over and paddled, by the studio over and over. And it's kind of this crazy thing when you hear him talk about it, you're like, and he talks about coming like almost to a fist fight. He's preparing to fist fight the second director who was put there by Universal. And he's like, he's a big wrestler type guy, but I was quick. So, I'm sitting there and he's like, if he gets his hands on me, it's over. He's like, so I'm practicing my jib jabs, like how I got to move my feet quick and just not let him get a hold of me. I mean, this is like, he's literally talking about like, he would go to bed at night being like, okay, if I have to fight this dude, this is how I have to fight him. So it's a lot
of stress.
Yeah, right. It's like, we've had some toxic working environments, imagining where like every night you're like, all right, we're going to fist fight. Tomorrow we're going to fist fight. And this is how it's got to go down. I've got to, it's really, really great watch. And a lot of the stuff that if you hear me referring to, Richard Linklater being quoted, it's probably from that. Or there was another interview he did. It's more recent. And he did it with the author of, All right. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the other gentleman's name but I'm sure you can find it. It's much shorter. It's like 15 minutes. But if you watch those in tandem, you kind of get a really nice, full view of the making of. Just kind of give you an idea of all the different ways hazing is kind of brought in and utilized in this film. It's a bad segue to go from hazing to favorite scenes, but you were talking about some of your favorite scenes, Chloe. Were there any other that are non-hazing related that you wanna maybe kind of cleanse our palate with?
Well, I love one of the scenes that I think, like, just rewatching this on a basis of I see it probably annually at least once or twice because it's a great movie, man. All right, so it's a great movie. It's like a comfort film. Sometimes you just want to roll up and roll up on the couch and watch it and roll up again.
That's right.
The ranking of Gilligan's Island scene on the chalkboard that you enter, and the popular preppy girls are like writing out their ranking of episodes, and then like that it moves into a great, actually, honestly, for its time, amazing little MIDI feminist speech from Kay Faulkner, right? And first of all, we do this shit on Twitter now, right? We make lists of shit on Twitter. Some people get like paid $5 for it on BuzzFeed, but we do it on Twitter for free. But Kay describes Gilligan's Island as sexist in the bathroom. And she's like, think about it. You're basically alone on a deserted island with two readily available women. One, a seductive sex goddess type. The other, a healthy girl next door type with a nice butt. So guys have it all, the Madonna and the whore. And women get nothing. We get a geek, an overweight middle-aged guy, some nerdy scientific type. So I have to respect that because for its time, I'm like, oh my God, that's you didn't expect that, right? In a stoner movie, you two. Disrespectful.
Well, I think, I don't know. We argued about Jojo Rabbit in another episode about whether or not, is Jojo Rabbit a war movie? Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? Like, so I think sometimes it's the best movies are hard to put into a box, right? Like this one is hard to put into a box. And I think Jojo Rabbit's another one that I really love and I think resonates with a lot of people. And it's a hard movie to put into a box. There is the other moment with the teacher talking about the 68 Democratic Convention, where it's like a kind of
like
another. Yeah, I thought that was just looking back on it, I was like, holy shit. And, I'm not sure where this fits in. I didn't have it in the notes, but one of the things that I thought was maybe a missed opportunity, there's the group has the black friend and, he's like welcomed in. There's like kind of, this is 1976. We're only, we're not more than, 20 years removed from, the Jim Crow laws being repealed. So, I thought it was an opportunity to kind of show that, everything wasn't just hunky dory. Like, oh yeah, like he's just one of us. I thought that there was an opportunity for that. I don't know. the context of history at that point. And we'll talk about how much of this was cut. We want the Linklater, the 2 hour plus cut. Yeah, we want that. And maybe there's some of that in there. But yeah, no.
There really wasn't much there for him, and that is disappointing. That was, and I don't know if that was cut. I didn't. I watched through most of the deleted scenes at least once or twice, not once this week, but there really wasn't a lot. So that I also wonder, and I mean, let's be honest, that all media is racist and is sexist. We've seen that. I mean, that's just historic. You can't really lie about it if you look back on a graph of time. And it wasn't better in the 90s. And obviously this is a mostly white cast.
Well, they probably thought they were progressive by including a black person at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Like they probably thought that was progressive.
That's something that hasn't aged well in this. I would say, especially like, I don't know, even just giving more story for that. I think there's some great movement as far as like mid 90s white woman feminism, but that doesn't really mean a lot, not anymore.
Yeah, no, and it's not a criticism because the movie's still great. I just, if we're gonna nitpick, right, that's probably one thing where it's just it stood out because I felt like on this watch I noticed what you're talking about, like the feminist kind of sprinkled in there, and I thought, wow, that is actually pretty progressive. And I think that's what whet my appetite. I was like, well, I wish there was just maybe a little bit more of it with this other character who they had a great opportunity to do it with.
And you can see, like, I think that Linklater kind of thinks about it, but I don't think it's something that Linklater is actually interested in exploring, especially when you look at the rest of his body of work. He's never really focused on trying to write any of those in his casting, I would say.
No, you're right.
But like, there's like that weird moment, right, where the shot lingers a little longer on the opening of a locker. And inside you have a couple of Black American heroes, and
Muhammad
especially
Ali.
I think most specifically Muhammad Ali, and that would have been really top of mind for the 70s, maybe not necessarily the 90s, but the 90s.
That's true.
Looking back on the 70s because of Muhammad Ali's role in refusing the draft for the Vietnam War. So
and an enormous pop culture icon as well. It's probably important to note that Linklater himself was an athlete in school. He talks about that, and he was a really good baseball player, and so I think that probably that was part of the Mitch character being written in. I always wondered, when I go, or I shouldn't say always, but since doing this podcast, right, and you look at a director or a writer, in a case where it's a director-writer combo, and I look at the characters and I'm like, well, which one is him, right? I do this with George too, right? And it's like a lot of times it's mostly Sam, right? But sometimes you're I see a little bit of it with like John. He's probably writing himself in there, or his love interest. It's like, is your Grit Paris, or is whatever the case may be. And I was wondering, watching this, who's Linklater? Is it Jason London, or is it Mitch, or who is it? And I think probably the answer is it's a little bit of both, right? So I do think that's just worth noting and pointing out. And if you do a rewatch, or some people like to listen to the podcast and watch the movie later, maybe keep that in mind. Other favorite scenes for you, Chloe?
The car wash baptism. I know Eliana wanted to talk about this one too deeply, but I think Sabrina's awakening, right? Like, it's a total moment. Sabrina is the only girl in the back of the truck to let the hot, horrible, soapy water wash all over her. And I think that's just such a great moment in seeing that, like, the other girls are all screaming and she's not like other girls, again, with that great mid-90s, feminism romp. But there is just that moment that, like, that's her awakening, and it's not, you see her at the party that night, it is the big story, right? Like, this is the big hero's journey, is get to the party so we can party our asses off and forget about everything horrible that's happened today and for the rest of our lives and maybe last year. But like, that she like goes on that little journey after that, and she is untouchable after that, right? Like, even when Darla, God bless her heart, when Darla messes with her, and is like, I'm gonna make your life awful, no way. And I don't know, I like them a lot, Sabrina and Mitch, as like we were all that age. You said yourself, we're going back with kind of a different mindset this time of what I was like in high school compared to then. But I think all of us creating that protagonist, that Samwell Tarly, that all of us have been like a scared little nerd on their way to high school. I think that's so special. Such a special little journey.
And you know what's so, and this is probably like, another Tommy's coming clean moment.
Oh no.
I feel like this the most like scared little nerd I've ever felt like is at Ice and Fire Con. Is that weird? It is such a weird thing. It's the community, and I should, if people may not notice this, some casual listeners, other people who know me and are maybe more familiar with my like intimate interests are, they're paying attention. They know like we've had a lot of Song of Ice and Fire related guests on here. That's who I listen to. These are the people I enjoy listening to. So naturally, when it came time to me to do a podcast like this, where I could reach out to people and ask them to come on, like these are the people who I'm a fan of, right? It would, and it's a crazy thing because I said this to Ashaya, but like you guys are like kind of like my for some people, I'm just using Joe Rogan as an example because he's wildly popular as far as like numbers of listeners. Like they were like, oh, that's who I would want. Like, no, like I want. There's like really like there's two other content creators or not content. There's two other podcasts with 4 content creators that I would like to have. One of them happens to be married to one of our guests who I'd like to have on. The other one is the duo that makes up Radio Westeros. But other than that, like I've had my Mount Everest totally done. Like you guys have all been on my show. If I
Were
didn't,
your conquests?
not conquest. You guys are my.
You gotta need a higher bar.
No, you guys are my. I know my professional idols, the people I look up to, my more than something higher than contemporaries. I wouldn't say we're contemporaries, but you guys are people,
luminaries.
Yeah, luminaries. I'm a baby.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But no, in terms of like like we're all creating content. I'm listening to people who are a lot better than me, trying to pick up things. And so it's been really really cool. But at Ice and Fire Con, maybe, and it's weird because I feel like the episodes I do with non-Ice and Fire Con related creators are maybe my performance is better with the non, because I'm normally revved up. I'm nervous. I don't know. Like it's a weird, I'm just anxious, I guess. I have a lot more anxiety because these are people who, I'm like, I look up to. They're, I care about their opinions and I really want to be accepted. So, I can relate to these feelings that you're talking about more so later on in my life. I think as a kid, I was just so like, again, small school, small town. I had these friends that I loved and they were my friends my whole life. I never felt uncomfortable. I never questioned like where I stood with them. They're still my friends today, like some of my, there's, so it wasn't until like college and a little bit in college, but more so like, again, later on in life, because once I got college is 4 years. And then I'm 20 plus or 20 years removed from college almost now. So it's a crazy thing. Eliana, some of your favorite scenes?
I was gonna say I had a panic attack and / anxiety attack at Balticon 2016, so I feel that.
Okay, yeah, it's a weird thing, when these people you listen to for a really long time are suddenly in front of you and you're talking to them and you're like, it's a different thing. You think I always thought listening to you guys, to History of Westeros, to any number of Daryl Mansell from Paprika, it's like, oh, if I ever got to see them, I would say X, Y, and Z, or I would talk to them about this, or there's a million things you guys say during an episode that I can relate to, but then all of a sudden you meet them and it's just like, oh, can I take a picture? Thanks. Yeah,
I will say, as someone that I'm not like gonna sit here and be like, oh, that's too bad for you guys. No, I've gone to a lot of conventions like for a long time. So the social aspect is like, for me, I'm kind of like, sometimes I just have to put my mind at con mode into like underdrive and just be like, yes, nice to meet you. I'm sorry, I'm not excited. This is just my natural state. But for Ice and Fire Con particularly, it's different because it feels more high stakes because it's people that like think like you, weirdly, like about the weird things you think about. Like they're walking down the hall and you hear them talking about like, oh, is this Aegon a Blackfire? And you're like, what? Aegon, like from the books? Aegon from the books? Y'all talking about Aegon? Like it's a very exciting, like it's the first. So I went to Ice and Fire Con for the first time in 2016, and I wanted to go for my birthday, and I told my friend, I was like, will you go with me? So we both went. We got a suite. We were so excited. We like went for the good room and everything. We're like, we just want to be comfortable while we're anxious, you know? And we just made ourselves go to events. We like forced ourselves to go to events and just met people. And like, we felt very overwhelmed. We were like, these people have known each other for ages because it had been going on since 2012, 2013. And we were like, they're never going to like us or accept us into their really intimate friend group, which was a silly idea because they did like immediately, which makes you feel sillier, right? Because the end you're like, God, why did I feel so foolish? And then like, yeah, it feels like high school. All over again.
But that's exactly why I bring it up, because it is like high school, and there is I'm not saying that it is cliquey, but I think what you hit it on the head. You see these people and there are these strong bonds that are already there. And if you haven't been there to develop those, you feel like an outsider looking in, and you want to be on the inside, but you're on the outside, and you just don't want to be the person that's just like, hey, the hanger on. So yeah, a small segue. Ice and Fire Con, by the way, hopefully 2022. That's something that happens.
Is happening next year.
And if you're a fan of a Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire, you should be looking at that and getting tickets.
Yeah, the room blocks are open now. Tickets are open now, so head over to the website. I don't like to be like Daenerys at the top of my titles, but I also do some freelancing for Ice
That's
and
right.
Fire
You're part of the small council.
I dabble.
You might be part of the small council.
You catch me everywhere.
That's right.
I nap.
So,
yeah, you nap.
Napping is a very underrated part of Ice and Fire Con. Strategic naps. If you know when to take them and how to take them. Just don't be like Scott Wortman, who also, we have a comment here. Yeah, he says he was also nervous at Ice and Fire Con, but he slept through the joust. The tourney. He slept through the tourney. He napped through the tourney.
That's the easiest time to make friends. Everybody wants to make friends.
Yeah.
Everyone's drinking. They're merry. They're like, yeah, we're at a sporting event, man. It's like this.
You know what though? I'll give maybe a lot of years my only year was 2019, and that was the year everyone was dressed as Freys. So not being dressed as a Frey, I was like, well, there's a whole side over here where there's a very Frey centric group, and they all seem to be in on something. And I was like, holy shit, that was one of the moments that actually made me feel more like an outsider, because I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's happening. Was there a memo? Should I have come dressed like a Frey? Where's my Frey hat?
The group of people that orchestrated, so we have a lot of pranks that happen sometimes at Ice and Fire Con. Like one year, there was something in the auction that was House Dane related, and I really wanted it. And my two buddies, Brian and Brian, that hang out at the con, outbid me like at the last moment, because they knew it was me, and they knew my bitch ass was hungover. And so they won it, and I was very upset. It's okay. I know the artist. I'm commissioning it. But so like that's one. Then one year, one of our friends could not come. So that same group of people bought a blow-up doll that they then printed out the friend that couldn't come's face, put it on him, put a shirt that friend wears. They bought a duplicate shirt that friend is known to wear. And they put it on the blow-up doll, and then they took the blow-up doll around the entire grounds of the convention and did photo shoots of the doll doing things, saying, we're doing this thing with Marty today. We're doing this thing today. Marty is having a panel today. They put him in the chairs. So come to Ice and Fire Con, because it's all shenanigans. It may seem like you're on the outside of stuff like that, but that's free entertainment. I guess just watch it amused.
1,000%. I mean, even having said that, you can go back and watch the New Dad Best Things of 2019. It's the very first episode I ever did. Ice and Fire Con was prominently featured. So even feeling that way, it was still like the best thing. And I immediately bought tickets to 2020 and 2021 and highly awaiting 2022.
Yes.
Eliana, we'll bring it back to Dazed and Confused. I promise. For anyone,
I'm like just reliving my memories, and I'm like, at least you're not gonna get. I don't think you'll get paddled.
No,
not unless you want it.
No, not
consent is very important at Ice and Fire Con, but paddle away privately wherever you like.
I do feel like if you were consenting, you could find someplace to get paddled at Ice and Fire Con.
They're there. I promise you, they're all there.
I almost posit. Favorite scenes, Eliana. Do you have any favorite scenes that you wanted to bring up here?
Yeah, I want to come back quickly to the car wash scene, because I just wanted to say, like, I just wanted to say that, like, though it's not one of my favorite scenes, like watching that, I was like, wait, that's my dream. I wanted to be brought through the car wash, but I was told it's actually like very hot and dangerous, and maybe it wasn't in the 70s. I don't know, but like every time I would go through the car wash, I'd be like, amazing. But what if I felt the Omni shower?
It looked hot and painful.
It probably is. Like I hear it's like actually probably really bad for you. So anyway, that's
I was afraid
dream.
of car washes as a kid. Like literally, like my parents would go through them when I was like a little kid, and I would freak out. I don't know. Maybe there's something we can dig into there. We're not going to do it today, but okay. So that freaked me out a little bit. Like
we cancel out. We
1,000%. 1,000%.
It's so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah, no, I have a family friend who still, like, to this day, I call him Uncle Nestor, but when I see Uncle Nestor, almost like clockwork, I can guarantee he's going to tell the story about the first time he and my mom took me through a car wash and I screamed bloody murder through the entire thing, where it was just like I was terrified, where I was like at the window, like, ah! Like someone was trying to get me. So totally relate. On the flip side, my son Shep was like, hey, like recently, he's 3 years old. This was like probably, I don't know, 6 months ago. But out of the blue was like, Dad, let's go to a car wash. And I'm like, what? Yeah. You want to do a car wash? Like, let's do a car wash. And then he was thrilled. He loved it. He thought the car wash was the coolest thing. So
he didn't get that from you. That's good.
It's like a ride. It's like a cool ride.
He loved it.
We got to get you out of the house more.
Oh yeah.
So speaking of so the scenes that I do actually like, a couple of them are towards the beginning, right? So I know that we talked about hazing is bad, but I kind of really love the little detail. I don't know if she came up with this, like Jodie's actor came up with this, where like Sabrina's on the ground proposing to that senior, and sorry, names are hard, and she's told to get on her knees and propose, and like as she's on her knees, Jodie's just wiping her hands off in Sabrina's hair. Just that tiny detail. She's like, oh, my hands are so dirty with these condiments that I've sprayed on the freshman. Let me just wipe it in her hair. It doesn't fucking matter. And then again with the hazing, but like the small detail where Betty at the beginning is not wearing the goggles, because like, so a lot of my friends were in robotics, and I did have a shop class in 8th grade, and I was like, I didn't even see the side of where the goggles is like that boy needs to wear goggles when you operate machinery, and he's just like chilling, and the goggles are on his head. He could put it on easily. Hilarious. Another small detail I like is a lot of these are just like small moments. And I'm like, that's so cute. Slater stepping on the plants. He's trying to go into his friend's house where they're gonna like have the party, and then he just trips and steps on the plant. I'm like, now as a person with plants, I'd be so mad. I'd be like, what the fuck, dude? That's my plant.
I love that. I have to say that's the most like stoner friend shit. Like, didn't you all have that one friend who's a total stoner and you couldn't take them anywhere in high school, that you were like, you can't fucking come over to my parents' house, dude. Like, you will wreck their nice thing or whatever. Like, that's such a classic burnout dude thing, that he just like, you're like, come on, man, be cool, Slater, be cool. And he's just stepping on plants.
Oh my God.
Oh,
it is.
No, I was the wiping of the condiments. I did not notice till you put it in the notes. I had to go back and watch it. It's so amazing and such a subtle touch. To anyone if you haven't caught that part, it's fantastic. And the plants part was one that just killed me, because it is. I will say, my parents were potheads, and my dad was not your typical pothead, because you think like laid back, chill. No, he had like a temper like fucking crazy. So that, like, I'm trying to imagine, like, that scene broke me, because I'm trying to imagine someone stepping on my dad's plants and what he would have done to them. Like, he would have fought them in the front yard. Like, that shit would have happened.
I'd fight them in the front yard.
Yeah, like my dad would have fought that person in the front yard. You also had you have a couple more that I wanted to talk a little bit about, a little bit more about, the pitching scene with Mitch.
Oh, that rhymes. I actually really liked that scene. It's just like, it's so different, I think, totally from a lot of signals of shift, right, in the movie, where it goes into slow-mo for Mitch, and there's like so many things at stake of like, you know, he's about to get paddled. And also I didn't know that like baseball pants had those little loopy things like around your feet. Yeah, stirrups. I'm like, what the fuck is this? So funny. But apparently the actor playing Mitch, Wiley Wiggins, I guess, was really bad at baseball and pitching. So they had to like, you know, the Richard Linklater had to tell him like, it's okay, we're gonna bring in a double who will do the pitching and we'll just like do it in slow-mo, right? And I like that the slow-mo ends up giving this like really dramatic weight to that scene, but also at the same time, like, you know, you're like, this is kind of meaningless in the long run, but it makes it like this really important moment for Mitch. But then also it gives them like on a more practical level the ability to bring in that double, and I thought that was real nice. It's Aziz.
Yeah, Aziz is here. He's tuning in. To your point on that film too, like, or on that scene, they also talked about in that little short that Chloe and I were mentioning, the making of, how they had brought in a little league team as extras for that scene, and the kids were actually making fun of Wiley as he's filming the scene. So it added this level of just, you know,
bullying.
100% bullying, but there was
Tommy
this moment.
The expert.
But whoa, hold on. Can we please talk about? Okay, I may have admitted
Tommy.
it, but here, like, Eliana's, all of her favorite scenes involve people being like hit or spanked or degraded. So
that says more about her than me. Don't point this at me.
Well, no, I'm just saying, you want to call me the bully. I'm just letting you know whose favorite scenes happen to be the bullying scenes.
That's not because of bullying.
No,
I just think it's funny. That's just goofy shit. Wiping your hands in someone's hair.
No, it is. It's no.
And one of them is being unsafe in
No,
shot.
maybe you both are bullies. Holy shit.
But no. So in that documentary too, there's a scene where Richard Linklater is talking about, so like, he, in between takes, he has to go and talk to the actor, you know, Wiley. He's getting heckled. He can't do this. You know, he and I think this is like one of the moments that I think it's a beautiful moment, because it's not just you know, this really beautiful moment of trust between an actor and a director, but this is a kid, you know, the Wiley, who plays Mitch, he was just picked up off the street. He was a kid. Like, he was literally just a kid who was walking down the main thoroughfare and was at, like, basically, you want to be in a movie, and auditioning, got it. Supposedly, I wasn't able to fact check this, but supposedly he also lied about being able to pitch. So I don't know if that's accurate. I didn't see that in any interviews, but it was on IMDb. But so, you know, Richard Linklater pulls the kid aside and says, "Hey, listen, tonight is going to be really humiliating, but if you trust me, I'm not going to make you look stupid in the end. Like, I'm going to make this look good." And the kid was able to like pull his shit together and like do whatever he needed to do. And you know, he's like, I don't know if I can act my way out of a paper bag, but that scene is the scene most.
Aww. I think it might be muted there, Tommy.
There it is. Sorry. The reason we do this podcast is that we like watching movies, but also going back and rewatching them, we can pick up on these smaller things. We can dig in deeper. That's where I'm being rewarded, is learning, you know, about these behind the scenes type deals. That scene is just, going back and rewatching it, so much more, I guess, emotional to a certain degree. And then you also talked about the dance scene, Eliana, right? Oh, now you're muted. Now you're muted. Sorry. Yeah.
I wanted to mute my typing for like.
Sorry. Yeah.
Is the audio cut out?
That was me. Yeah.
When I was typing earlier. So I thought that the dance scene was really interesting because there's that dance, that like, I guess, end of year 8th grade dance. And the incoming freshmen who haven't been paddled yet, they're about to leave the dance, right? And the adults, the chaperones, tell them, as they're leaving, like, once you leave, you can't go back in. And they're like, ha, did you hear that? Once we leave, you can't go back in. They're kind of making fun of it. And, like, obviously they mean it in the literal sense, right? Like, in many places, once you leave, you can't readmit. But it's also very much like a metaphor for, like, once you leave middle school, once you leave that age, or once you leave adolescence, you can't go back. That's
the hero's journey, man. It's literally the hero's journey. That's one of the stages.
I was like, wow.
Crossing the threshold, man. They're crossing that threshold. It's over. That's rite of passage, moving on. Yeah. And I have to say, I snuck in my high school friends into my 8th grade graduation dance, and I got kicked out of my dance. They didn't take it any further. They're like, if you guys just leave, we're not gonna do it. And I was like, all right, bye. So we went and lit off fireworks in the elementary school parking lot. And then we got
they were like little Woodersons.
Yeah, little Woodersons, exactly. Yeah. They were that was me, unfortunately. I was I hung out with the older kids, because I don't know, as I told you, the 8th graders sucked. They were meaner than the high schoolers, but the high schoolers also bullied me, now that I think about it, in intimate ways too. A lot of things making sense today.
We're just connecting a lot of dots. A lot of people coming clean. A lot of closets are getting, a lot cleaner as well. I'm speaking personally mostly, but Eliana, I think maybe is coming clean a little bit too.
No, I'm perfect.
Okay.
So I love the dance scene, but I loved it for totally different reasons. And I think this is a lot of the smartest stuff that's been said on any of the episodes has not been said by me. It's been said by my guests. I think this is a beautiful illustration. You and Chloe both talking about the baptism scene. I didn't see it but some of these things become very clear when someone else points it out that way, but then you're like, oh yeah, it very much is like a baptism. The dance scene to me stood out for a couple of reasons. One, did you guys ever have a school dance that was like this? Because it was fucking wild. They had a blacklight room specifically set up for kids just to get down in. And there were also parent chaperones, adult chaperones there, because as you said, Eliana, they tell them hey, if you guys leave, you can't come back. But they don't give a shit that kids are getting down in this room separated by a divider. It's, I'm not going to call it romantic, but it's dark and there's black lights. So is this what your guys' dance is like? Because again, I went to Catholic school. Maybe my dances sucked and they were lame.
No, okay. We didn't have it. Well, we did have a separate room. The dances themselves were at least they were dark.
Yes,
already.
Yeah.
They were already dark. It was a large black lighted room where I guess.
Could you just go off to the corner and just start groups of young teenagers young kids start making out with no adult to be like, yo, fucking
yes, but the adults would eventually come in, I guess, and tell them to stop. But that did happen. There was lots of, especially within the time that I grew up. The aughts. There was grinding, not this awkward holding one another.
Grinding.
There was a grinding.
Oh,
13-year-olds.
We did the dagger dance, y'all.
You just awakened an entire part of myself. I hope I have forgotten.
Yeah. Eric Neese, the grind, y'all.
Oh God, we had something called activity nights. That was same thing. You had you could go off. Kind of, but you'd have chaperones pass by. So you got to be swift, and no one wanted to be swift with me. So
our dances were dark, right?
Tragic.
And I think some of our dances we could leave and come back. So I guess if you wanted to go make out in a car, you probably could. But it certainly wasn't happening on the dance floor or anywhere in the near vicinity. Maybe again, that's a product of Catholic school. So the other thing I really, really enjoyed about the dance was Hirschfeld, who is, for all intents and purposes, throughout the, up until this point, kind of painted as the geek, a little bit. When they're leaving class, he's carrying all of his books. He's the last one. And then he's the one that's just getting down. And then, as they're leaving, Eliana kind of talked about you can't come back. Yeah, all right. Yeah, we know. But then Tommy Houston goes through this diatribe where he's we're never going to be, don't worry, dude. you're leaving your days of making out behind. We're going to be like actually getting it on with chicks soon. And Hirschfeld's like, yeah, man, I fucking doubt it. You know, I just love that scene where he's just like sees through all the bullshit, you know, like he knows it's totally fucking wrong and just says, no, fuck that. So yeah. Chloe, you also had brought up, you know, the whole, the nerd group with Cynthia and Tony. And I see it in the notes. We didn't touch on it, but I think there's a change in the movie that you mentioned in your notes that I want you to talk about because I agree it's one of the best changes in the whole film.
As someone who lived it, you know, as someone who lived this, like I said, timeless movie. Cynthia originally was supposed to date Tony, her fellow little nerd guy, you know, little gingery blonde strawberry guy.
Anthony Rapp. Yeah.
Yep, Anthony Rapp. And he and her were supposed to be a total thing, but there was no chemistry. Zilch. Not a single ounce of chemistry to be found. And it was not right. Like, the directors knew, you know, like everyone knew. They knew, obviously. They were kind of uncomfortable and they gave it a try. Just didn't work. And so they ended up rewriting Cynthia to have that thing with Wooderson. And something about their polar opposite energies, right? Her is like the curly-haired, redheaded, super nerd girl that wears corduroys and a wide striped tee. That she just pulls up and he's into her as an older guy that appreciates the fine things, right? The fine things here. And I just think it was great because it's so realistically raw, right? That like he's into her and she's into him, even though they stand for everything completely not of the other. And she's like, yeah, I'm into this.
And that scene was one that was like, it was kind of one of the things as they're filming, they realize because of the nature of this film, right? Because let me take a step back. Do you guys think there's a main character of this movie?
Necessarily, no. I would say that, and something you kind of mentioned earlier, that like since it's both also Mitch's story and kind of Danny's overall story, but also like standing in for like, I mean, just like teenagehood in general. I think everyone has a part to play in it.
Right. Eliana, do you think that there's a main character?
Yeah, I guess I would agree with what Chloe said. You know, there's not exactly one, but it is very much framed through the perspectives of Pink and Mitch. You know, like the person who's coming into their senior year and trying to figure out their place, and then also, Mitch trying to figure out where they fit in as well with those rituals.
And the reason I ask is, there's this moment where, Richard Linklater's talking about, it's a movie of these disparate groups and it's all converging towards this one event. And Chloe, you kind of talked about that too. That's what makes the movie great. That's, you have these different factions and we're all moving towards this one thing. And because of that nature, they actually got to a point where they realized like, well, holy shit, how do Tony and Cynthia and, Adam Greenberg's character know like about the party? How do they get there? And so that this was kind of like a late in, like, and I think a lot of it was just like kind of thrown in, and maybe even some of it was improv. But yeah, that it's the chemistry is palpable between Matthew McConaughey and Cynthia. It shouldn't work, but it totally does. It gets them to the party at the end. And it ends up, I don't know. It's like, I love this group, and, we're talking about how we relate to different factions, and, how we're looking at it through different lens. And I think probably like again, just to hammer home in case you're tuning in a little late, my first watches, I kind of related to Mitch. Later watches probably more so to, the Pink character. And now like later on, I'm relating more to Tony and the Greenberg character and Cynthia. Gosh, I need to bring up Greenberg's name, his character's name. Mike Goldberg, Adam Goldberg. I say Adam Greenberg. Goldberg, sorry. Yeah. Mike Newhouse. Sorry. Apologies to Mr. Goldberg. But yeah, so I'm relating to this group more. But I do think like on this watch or these last group of watches, that group 1,000%, it was all that it stood out. I felt like they kind of jumped off the screen a little bit more.
I love that they needed lived experiences. That's what this was. And him, obviously, like Mike's character is hysterical because he just wants to feel anything or have some sort of experience before he leaves this miserable place.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and he talked about the fight scene in the movie being a large part about why he took the role. And I actually found in one of the interviews that they did with Wiley Wiggins, the guy who played Mitch, he talked about the actor who fights Adam Goldberg. Chloe, do you remember his name? Kit,
I
maybe?
don't remember his name. I don't. I was actually thinking about that.
I think it's
Is it a Nick?
Nikki Cat.
Something.
Yes, Nikki
Yeah.
Cat. Nikki
Nikki,
Cat.
there you go.
So Nikki Cat convinces Wiley Wiggins to move to LA after he films this movie, and Wiley Wiggins says like it was like the biggest mistake of his entire life. He's like, it was the worst thing I ever did. They ate me up and like just spit me out.
I've heard some of that from him, like some of his interviews. I've read a little bit after. I kind of feel bad for the kid.
Right. But also, I was going to talk about this a little bit later on in the nostalgia piece. I thought it was really interesting hearing Richard Linklater talk about that fight scene specifically, since we're talking about it, and saying that was one of the things that he drew. A lot of this is drawn on personal experience. He had a friend who went to a party and said something like, I smell marijuana, and some dude beat the shit out of him because he said that. Just because he was like, oh yeah, I smell marijuana, and somebody was like, oh yeah, man, like that's right. And so that was like just to show like how real some of this stuff is. And 3 dudes actually sued Universal for the filming of this movie because their likenesses were not approved, but it was not a successful suit.
So you agree you got in a really stupid fight?
yeah, it's like so yeah, maybe he did.
I feel like could you not like fix that situation just by being like, yeah, would you share? Can I
That's
get a
what
hit?
most stoners would
That's
do.
like
That's kind of the law of stoners.
Right.
Like,
Well, one of the
yeah,
dudes,
man, you want some?
one of the dudes in the suit, his name is Wooderson. His literal last name is Wooderson. So
interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's up there. That's funny.
yeah, so it's like that's
I guess
hard
that's
to
legally.
it's hard to deny. But it was like the amount of time that had gone by, supposedly. That's how
statute of limitations.
Yep, exactly. That's why the smart people are on the show.
No, I just read the exact same thing that you're talking about.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. So yeah, just like you guys hit a lot of my favorite scenes. I guess outside of that, I love when the mailbox guy catches up to them. I just think that scene is great because the confusion, the whole idea of like when we were in high school, the way we would get beer when we wanted it, we called it. So we had 2 ways. We normally started with the way that we called "Hey Duding" it, which you just sit in a parking lot and be like, "Hey dude, can you buy us some beer?" So we'd be like, "Hey, like, let's go, hey dude it." If that didn't work, then what would happen is we would go we would drive really far away from wherever we lived. And one of us would park very far away from a gas station or someplace with easy access. And then another person would just walk in and grab a bunch of cases and run out. So like a beer run, a literal beer run that they talked about. That's how we got beer sometimes. So first of all, I love the scene because I'm like, I could relate to that. I remember like going into stores and just running out with beer, and then the idea that, like this guy's pretending it, but they had committed this atrocity by throwing the car or, hitting the guy's mailbox. And now this guy's caught up to him. I love it. The sheer terror, I guess maybe it's just that, like, I was mischievous. I like to do things, maybe, it was a troublemaker, a rabble rouser. So I can relate to that. I love when movies kind of like poke holes at, being on the wrong side of history with certain things. So when they showed the pregnant mom buying booze at the store and she's getting advice from the store clerk, he's like, you need more calcium. That part, it really registered on the rewatch where I was like, yes, this is amazing. Great commentary, and really cool to know that store clerk appears in Boyhood, later on.
Interesting.
A lot of my favorite scenes in this movie, strangely enough, don't have a lot of dialogue. They're just the scenes that kind of like the opening scene with "Sweet Emotion" by Aerosmith, and it's just the parking lot and the car pulling in. The scene where Wooderson and Pink and Mitch are walking into Emporium for the first time, and Hurricane's playing. When Alice Cooper has his song playing and school's over for the year. Those a lot of those scenes kind of kind of stand out to me. And I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, the other scene I had was the dance scene, which we've already talked about at nauseum. We'll get into the nostalgia aspect of this film. And I think probably the biggest thing that surprised me was reading that the director aimed to make an anti-nostalgia film. And then what he ends up making is one of like the all-time nostalgic films that could exist. I guess before I get into some of my bits on this, we've talked about why I think this is rewatchable and so popular is because of the nostalgia aspect. We've talked a little bit with the hazing about the negative nostalgia, but positively, I think there's two aspects of nostalgia happening. You can go back and appreciate the 70s and also the 90s in which the movie was released. What sort of feelings of nostalgia does this evoke for you guys?
Definitely my dad and I just listen to music, him blaring 70s rock in the garage, working on something. I mean, that's what it reminds me of overall. Absolutely.
Anything for you, Eliana? Because I know, maybe this is a little bit harder of a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just being able to chill, right? Being able to easily float between different groups of people and seeing them again, right? And because as you get older, you kind of lose such a wide variety of people that you're just kind of forced to hang out with all of the time and things like that. Especially now there are a number of things preventing us from doing that now, but yeah, I think all of that and even just the low stakes, right? I think one of the points that they were making, you're talking about the anti-nostalgia thing is he wanted to kind of react against the John Hughes sorts of movies where everything weighs so much. And he's like, I wanted the biggest problem to be we got to get Aerosmith tickets. And I'm like, yeah, dude. I think for me, the nostalgia is the days when, to an extent, the problems were simple and small. I mean, they weren't all simple, right? Again, compartmentalization, but
yeah, no, I think, yeah, that's yes, 1,000% things were simpler when you're younger. I do think that there's a large part of what's going on that has to do with, I don't want to just repeat what I said earlier, but it's just the fact that all these people in the film are so relatable, right? That. And Chloe, you kind of hit on this too a little bit earlier, that regardless of when you went to high school, and I think we all kind of experienced that at different times, there are people that you kind of relate to, or you associate with a Slater or a Ben Affleck character or Jeremy London or whoever the case may be, or Jason London, sorry. Twin brothers, by the way. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But, there's other things that I think hit, that it's party at the Moon Tower. No one has to ask where the Moon Tower is, right? In this movie, everyone just goes to the Moon Tower. Did you guys have something like that when you guys were in school? Did you guys have a Moon Tower type, I guess, location where you just went to party?
I didn't really get invited to many parties, mostly because my parents were cool, but then stopped being cool. Does that make sense? They were cool when I was younger. They were the cool parents, but they never evolved beyond that. My curfew, I had a very tight curfew. I had to be home by 9 or 10 p.m. latest. I couldn't, on weekdays, I couldn't just go off. I mean, it changes. I started going to college and cosmetology school and all sorts of stuff a little bit. Also, I lied a lot. I just said I was sleeping at a friend's house. So again, more intimate kind of hangs. But I will say there were a few places we smoked under the bridge, on railroad tracks. There were railroad tracks at the end of my neighborhood. And so we'd just walk them and find the first underpass and just sit there and smoke. Maybe it was out of a Coca-Cola can. You don't know. We don't monster can rinsed out, stab some holes in it, some foil from someone's cigarette.
Yeah, okay. Make a little steamroller. Hey.
Let's go. And that changed. After you got your own car, that was the best part, right? We loved to go to this one place, which was in a redacted town in the Midwest where I lived. and it was like an ironworkers little thing, like an industrial suite. And I would drive my ZR2 Highrider Chevy S10 truck. My dad got me that because only 2 people could sit in it. He thought I couldn't cause trouble. Bitch, I had a truck bed.
Yeah.
I would put like 5 people in my truck bed, and we'd drive this little industrial area at night where people weren't anymore because the factory shifts got out, and we would smoke to our heart's content over there, and railroad tracks and that for sure.
Eliana, what about you? Because you had kind of a similar, or maybe not with the railroad tracks, but parking structures.
Yeah, so I will say, because Chloe brought it up, she was talking about taking her friends to an elementary school. There was an elementary school. I don't remember what it was called, but everyone kind of knew it because a lot of it was underground, and people would kind of climb onto a structure, and you could see deer. It was like grass, but on top of a building, and people would go there to hang out, but not like a lot of people because it's also a school and you could get in trouble. But yeah, parking lots were big. I don't know that there was like just one, but like my friends and I would go to like these parking lots in one of the town center and go to the very top of like the very, like the large parking structures, and from there you can just climb onto like the roofs of the other buildings, or like my friends would just like hold shows, like play music. They would hook up their amps like to their cars and then like fucking jam out until we got kicked out, which
that's wild to me. So yeah,
it was cute.
Yeah,
there
that's
were
all.
a lot of shows. Shows are also the other part of my youth. Like that was where I went. We would all go. There was a place in this downtown town next to us that they like a church, a Presbyterian church. So this is crazy, but they threw the most rocking shows. And I remember drinking apple pucker I stole from my mother in a church bathroom. So, okay, I called you a bully. I'm sorry. Here are my sins. I stole my mom's shitty alcohol, not even good alcohol. It was just like, this doesn't taste bad. I was like 15, and I stole it to drink in the bathrooms and got drunk at like screamo shows and hardcore shows, like bands like, I don't know what, not good bands. Well, they were okay, but not great bands in a church like basement.
Oh. Dude, churches held a lot of shows. I don't know why. They held a lot of not just any shows, like
money.
Churches held a lot of punk rock shows. All right.
Did you guys go to, or did you guys live in fairly larger towns or cities?
Yes and no.
I think so.
Okay. Because I was going to say, maybe that's the difference too.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a very rural aspect. So a lot of our hangouts, not the type, it was like someone, like my grandma's farm. My grandma had a farm that was non-operational. She had a bunch of like empty barns and pole barns, and like we would just have bonfires and drink there. Like that was mostly, that, or like there was a lot of what was really popular in our time were like cool moms and dads, where it'd be
like in Mean Girls.
Yes.
My parents were the cool alcohol parents. Like if you were going to drink, do it here.
Just sleep here. Yeah. Leave your keys here. We'd rather know where you're doing. So we had like some parents like that, and that was always awesome. But yeah, being a very small town, there wasn't like the one place we had, because there's also like a top burger too, like or like a Max or a Peach Pit, like
Denny's.
I don't know any of these.
You don't know any of these? The Peach Pit
I know Denny's. I don't know any of these.
Ours was Denny's.
Well, the Peach Pit is from Beverly Hills 90210, and the Max is from Saved by the Bell. Okay.
So these were real places for
no.
They are in our hearts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, in our hearts. Sorry. No, like these pop or these pop culture fictional places where our characters would go and hang out. These central locations was like kind of like the cool place to go. Like we did have a place that was called Three Brothers, affectionately known as a lot of people as Six Nuts, like maybe not so creative, but that's what they called it. And it was a 24-hour diner. So that was like, high school kids would go there because they could smoke. They had a cigarette machine. There was like a machine, so you could just buy cigarettes and you could smoke in the restaurant at that time. So you could go, you could smoke your cigarettes, you could you can have your food. That was the time for us. History of Westeros says moons
Denny's.
Over hammy is the food of the gods.
If you went to Denny's, especially in the aughts, that's what you ate. You ate that. Their omelets were king, and if it didn't taste like cigarette smoke in Denny's, were you doing it right? Our senior skip day, I will never forget. This is still back when you could get lung cancer for fun at Denny's.
For free.
You walked in and all of the seniors from redacted Midwest town were like in this Denny's, okay? And it wasn't at the Novi Road exit in Michigan, first of all, but all of these children were just like, all these 17, 18-year-olds were in there, and there was a haze of cigarette smoke in the air. And I left. I was wearing like these white Vans or Etnies or something. And I freaking left that place, and I had to throw those shoes out because they smelled so bad, and it would not come out just from being in there, chain smoking Marlboro Reds with all the other seniors in Michigan at that moment that were skipping school. It was intense, very intense. So that is actually, I will go with, that's another nostalgia one for sure. Just coffee, cigarette, coffee. We're 17, 18, skipping school. This is what life's about to be like.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, but you know, there is a greatness, there's a purity to that. And you know, I can relate because that, like, we didn't have a Denny's in our time, but we did have, you know, Three Brothers was our substitute. Same thing, yeah, exactly what you're talking about. 1,000%. You know, and it is something. You know, it's something that I find like a lot of people have. You know, a 24-hour diner. That's what you do. That's what you go, and you're going to find a lot of different people there. I thought we missed something that I really wanted to go back to. Oh yeah. Chloe, in favorite part or favorite scenes, I think you had the scene where I did want to just talk about this because I thought it was a really great thing. Where the old couple grabs Jason
arm.
Yeah, his arm. I didn't know this. I read quite a bit. I'm sorry to backtrack a little bit, but yeah, I thought this was just a really great little tidbit.
This is perfect. You know, Danny Pink is great because in this moment, Jason London in the interviews, some of these snippets in Melissa's book, so good. He says that the old couple that grab his arm about football, and they're like, you got to do a lot of throwing yards with this arm this year for us. Are you going to hit 2,000? So this whole entire operation was a party. I guess we probably could have fronted with that, but if you didn't know, it was like summer camp when they recorded this. They were all like in their teens through mid to late 20s, and they were getting high and drunk on set, during it, out of it. Some of the people, which we'll talk about, like Ben Affleck was honestly, I'm very surprised, the most stable mind in these interviews. He's like, I kind of thought it was worrisome we were all doing so many drugs. And then he's like, and then I became an addict, which is why I probably thought this could be worrisome. I'm like, oh, this movie gave people some issues. But Jason London, that was the first time he smoked on set during the day, like during the work day. He had not partaken yet. So when the old people grab his arm and are like, son, you got to do a great job for us, he's high out of his mind for the first time at work, has not done that at work as an actor yet. And then after that, he says, you know, holy crap, this is so surreal. That's when I discovered, like, wow, for certain scenes, having a little puff is not a terrible idea.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Amazing.
And, you know, also, again, hard to substantiate, but I also had read that he had smoked with Rory Cochrane before their final audition to kind of get into character, which I thought was really I enjoyed that little tidbit. And I think that, yeah, it is a nice segue back into the nostalgia because, you know, these characters, Jason London, you know, looking back on this film, they view this film very nostalgically, I think, you know, and that makes a lot of sense when you consider how many big names, you know, this was their first, or if not their first, their breakthrough. I think Matthew McConaughey had like a Miller Lite commercial that he had before this. You know,
he was in film school. He was in his senior year or junior year of film school, and they just like recruited him. And as you said earlier, he was not supposed to be a big role, and this was his breakout role.
Yeah, met the casting director at like a bar, and supposedly like they just talked about girls and golf. Yeah, golf and girls, and they were like, yeah, it was like a good old boys conversation. He's like, I got this real, and he's like the casting director who we'll talk about a little bit later. He's like, I got this real small role, and I grew into this big thing. But yeah, you know, like these actors, like it holds a very special place in their heart too. You know, and they look back at it pretty fondly. I thought one of the sad parts I had read was Jason London looks at this as like the last happy time of his life because his sister passes away shortly after this. and like, you know, his life, I guess, kind of fell apart after that. So that was one of the more sadder parts, you know, in doing the research of this. But, you know, it makes sense. You know, I think it just, again, with a film that invokes so much nostalgia in general, that the cast holds all this nostalgia, and it becomes very clear when you see like how many people actually participated in the 10-year anniversary at the Alamo Bowl. If you go watch that, you know, pretty much everyone, like Parker Posey, Matthew McConaughey, I mean, everyone, you know, all of the big names that you can think of, they were there for it. They came back for this, and you know, it holds an important place in their life, in their careers, really, to be honest. I did see, you know, Chloe, you had mentioned, you know, the soundtrack, you know, and with your dad listening to this sort of music, you know, being nostalgic. Probably worth noting that 1/6 of the budget was spent on the soundtrack for this movie.
And that's hard because
that's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, worse than that, though, is that they didn't. So when they put that money in, the hope is that you get that money back. Right? Like the hope is that like you're going to make lots of money, but they had to give that up because their budget, and with all of the tinkering we're going to talk about soon between back and forth of Universal and independent film, they had to give up the rights, and they just had to say, I'll make no money on the music. And that is like, that's the end. That's when you know that you're done. Like you probably won't get your movie made, but they failed.
It was, I mean, to put it into perspective, right? We covered Almost Famous, and Almost Famous is renowned for spending like $3.5 million on their budget, where a normal movie, like, they spend a little less than 1.5. But just to put this into perspective, 1/6 of the Dazed and Confused budget was put into, or 1/6 of the Dazed and Confused budget was put into the soundtrack. If that had been the case for Almost Famous, they would have had to spend a little over $10 million. Mm-hmm. So they spent 3.5, but with a $60 million budget, you know, this movie almost, you know, Dazed and Confused had like a $7 million budget, rounding up a little bit. They made, and the difference being too, also, I should mention, Almost Famous did not make their budget back, while you know, Dazed and Confused went over by a little bit. So again, worth mentioning. But you know, the music plays a huge role in this film. Such a huge role that I actually listed them in my strongest performances. And I have to ask, what is your guys' favorite song in this movie? And we'll start with Eliana.
Okay, interesting. I like Summer Breeze because I'm corny like that. I think that one's my favorite, probably of the soundtrack. But like you were talking about earlier, how some of your favorite scenes have to do with just like how well they incorporated the music into the movie. And I think like in that context, I'm like, wow, yeah, like the whole soundtrack like holds up so well in terms of like how it's delivered. Like even though I don't always listen to those songs in my day-to-day, when you see it like delivered like that, you're like, how can you not love it?
No, and I'll be 1,000%. Like, my parents grew me up on 70s rock, but it's not my favorite genre. It's really not. Like, there's not a lot of 70s rock I find myself listening to now, but I really enjoy this soundtrack. I guess I'm looking at some of the answers. What do you, Chloe, have for some of your favorite songs here?
I've got two strong ones I'm coming in hot on. First one, Cherry Bomb, hands down, great usage of the Runaways. I love Joan Jett. I love everything about Joan Jett and the Runaways and the Blackhearts. And I've seen her in concert 3 times across a decade. And I have to tell you, it was from like 45 to 55. She did not age. I was like, how are you still wearing those same pants? Amazing woman, talented woman. Love her so much. And Runaways and Joan Jett in general, just I feel like don't get enough love in any of these movies that are like 70s nostalgic kind of movies. But after that, Highway Star. I mean, Deep Purple. What a song. Have we not all rolled down the windows in the car, blaring Highway Star. And if you haven't, you got to do it at nighttime, your windows down a little bit, drive in a mountain area if you can. I live in a mountain area in Pennsylvania. I can go 2-3 hours, and just drive, get in some mountains and just put Highway Star on.
It is really good. As History of Westeros also agrees, Highway Star, so good. So good. I don't know if it's, I had a hard time when trying to pick my favorite song from this movie, kind of removing the scene that it takes place in, just judging it on the song alone. So I don't know if it's the favorite song, but my favorite combination of song and cinematic moment is definitely when they play Bob Dylan Hurricane, and it's Wooderson and Mitch and Pink walking into the Emporium for the first time. It's so good. And again, just one of the moments that I loved learning behind the scenes. Matthew McConaughey's talking, but he's like, the walk. And there's like, what? He's like, it's not with the heart first or the head first. It's with, and he points to his crotch. It's like, it's with this first. And when you go back and rewatch the scene, he's like, that's what kind of makes it. He's like, there's something about the scene that really, let me go to YouTube really fast. Yep, I need to moderate that real fast. But yeah, there is something about that scene that is just so incredibly just poignant, and it's hard to really hold on, let me just turn that down. It's just hold on one second, folks. Just need to. Why is the chat not?
But absolutely, I mean, that scene's like fantastic, and just that's among them. And also as you were talking earlier about the opening scene, right, with
Sweet Emotion.
Yeah, I know it was it's kind of cheating, but when we're talking about favorite scenes, I was like, is it cheating to say the opening scene where that song's playing, and then you get to see all of the different people and what their lives are like, and as it opens up. And then let's see some of the other ones. The closing scene, right?
The closing scene.
The closing scene, and then as the instrumentals start coming in more, as you start seeing all of the cast coming in, etc. And it's just, that one's great too.
And the Alice Cooper one I already mentioned. There's so many good ones that it's just the level of detail that went into the music and the choices, I think, really goes a long way. And I think that's also part of the reason this movie resonates so universally across people, is because it's authentic, right? I talked earlier about watching it with my parents. Chloe's talked about watching it with her dad, how the people who lived through this era kind of nodded along, and just to kind of prove that out. There was a point, in the making of this where Universal wants to include a song, I think during the credits, by a band, Jackal, who in 1993, it's a contemporary band. It's a cover of a Grand Funk Railroad song. And, Richard Linklater was like, no fucking way, I'm not going to do it. We're only having period centric music in this. So it was just wild to see just how, even the cars that the characters drove, these are period, there was 1970, 1973 cars. These cars absolutely were, the cars that people of that time would have driven. And, the movie is probably an average teen movie if someone else makes it. But this is something made by someone who lived through it, who drove these cars, who listened to this music. And just another really cool thing that I thought was, I assume this sort of thing happened all the time in the film industry, but when you hear the actors and actresses talk about how this was something that they hadn't experienced up until that point, which is maybe understandable considering we just talked about how this is their first time. But these are interviews they're doing 10 years later, where they're saying I've still never had a director who made me a mixtape of all of the songs and sent it to me and said, this is your character. So when I showed up on the set, they already knew. There was yo, I know who my character is because this is the music. McConaughey was listening to ZZ Top and Frampton Comes Alive. Like that's what his shit was. And it comes through. Like he's wearing a Frampton Comes Alive t-shirt, throughout the whole movie. So this level of detail, the just the curating that went into it, I think 100% should be in the strongest performances. I think there's no doubt. And I guess for my favorite songs in the Bob Dylan Hurricane, the Sweet Emotion is probably the other one that comes to mind. Yeah, where it's like it's just a really perfect song for the perfect time. Great way to open them. And then they keep referencing Aerosmith. Again, the level of detail. So Aerosmith played 3 shows in Texas in 1976. All of those shows took place in June, and there was a Houston show that took place in June 1976, where you have Jason London's character Pink talking to Wooderson. Is like, hey, you going to Houston to get the Aerosmith tickets? And then the Aerosmith tickets come up again. So this is like more likely than not, like that was an actual show that Richard Linklater went to. I just thought that was really, really cool. What about you guys? I'll get to some of my other strongest performances a little bit later. Chloe, what do you have in your strongest performances?
We definitely got to talk about Parker Posey. We have not put enough of an emphasis on Parker Posey today. Airstrike. Yeah, she is just like the worst, and I love her so much. I want her to absolutely haze me and ruin my life. That might be a personal preference. Again, don't have time to dig into it today. That's a whole nother podcast. Don't know where, don't know when. She was amazing though. She was having so much fun on that set. I'm so happy for her. She had to have had so much fun.
Well, and I don't know if she was one of those people like Matthew McConaughey who ended up having a bigger part, but it definitely sounds like listening to a lot of the interviews that they didn't know what they had in her. And all of a sudden she showed up and she breathed a certain sort of life into the, not just Darla's role, but just like the whole movie in general.
I think that so a lot of the movie actually was improv, right? We'll talk about more of this as we go, but there's so much of this movie that's straight up improv. And that like they did something or they said something off camera and they were like, say that in a second. Or like they said, what would you do if we said this with the cameras on? And they like kept it. There was so much of that ended up in film. So I'm curious about that, but I couldn't find much on that. She had fun with the role, nevertheless. But
so also loved those scenes, love that character, and like I'm like, oh god, does this play into the whole hazing? Do I like the hazing? But like her scene, like her delivery is amazing. But you were talking earlier about like how people were saying, oh, I don't know if I'll ever work again with a director like Richard Linklater who makes you mixtapes and stuff like that. Turns out Parker Posey and I forgot the other actress's name.
Joey Lawrence.
The one who, yes.
Simone,
yeah. Simone's actress. Like they had this opportunity that they really wanted to take advantage of, where they could write their own scenes. Apparently, I don't know which ones they wrote specifically, but they were saying that like they seized having that and weren't really able to get that same opportunity later on with like other works. So
Richard Linklater, he talks about that those scenes and how they didn't end up making it into the final film, but he filmed them, and he remembers getting a lot of pushback from the studio being like, why are you like, what do you mean you're filming these scenes that the actresses are bringing to you? And he was just like, they're good scenes. And Chloe, to your point where you're looking to see where like a lot of the good lines came from, I did see a quote with him where he's showing one of his early scripts, and he's going through and he's like, the best lines are all in the margins, meaning like there were notes that were put in there by the actresses or the actors or maybe other people who are other writers who are reading the script. But he did mention, like a lot of the best stuff that ended up in the movies, it wasn't in the original script. It's in the margins.
That's one of the issues, right? Because with him and Universal, like the biggest thing, and I know we're not going to go really into it because it's just like a huge battle, but the biggest thing for them is that they wanted a product and he was making art.
Yeah.
Like that's literally the biggest issue. He saw it as a beautiful creative project with these people that he was like, wow, they're great. They could bring so much to this. and they just wanted to sell it. And it was made with a lot of love and care. Like we talked a little bit about Slater, Rory Cochrane's. I don't know how to pronounce his name. How do you pronounce his name, Tommy?
Corcoran, I think.
Corcoran. Okay.
Yeah,
Rory Corcoran. He improv'd so much of his stuff. Almost like 70% of his stuff was improv that made it in, because he didn't really have a ton of lines. He just had like little stoner moments, you know. He like the Martha George Washington speech where he's like, and that's Martha Washington, man. She's a hip lady, man. She has a bull waiting at home for George every day, man. They're growing that shit up on Mount Vernon, man. They are. That was improv, like straight up just improv. And a lot of them were high and drunk during the time, as we said. But that was straight. Everyone was partying that night, too. Let's be real.
Yeah. So, I think this is a good point to, I like to save the viewer listener questions for the end, but this is a good, I'm going to bring it in here. Is there any surprises, certain careers that didn't take off as well as others from the group? And this was a question from one of our listeners, Adam Jenrick. For me, the answer is Rory Cochrane. Like, he's in my strongest performances. We might as well just talk about it now. I was completely blown away when I learned that he's Lucas from Empire Records. Are you guys Empire Records fans?
Not yet. I started the first episode, but I haven't. Oh wait, no. I'm confusing it with Empire.
Empire.
So
okay,
that's
yeah.
why I was like, that seems strange. That seems strange for him to be in that show.
No.
That explains it.
Empire Records is like another 90s teen movie.
But, he was in a lot of other stuff. He was in Scanner Darkly, if any of you out there are fans of that. He was in Argo, I want to say, wasn't he? He was in Argo.
Yes.
He was in a couple just like things that aren't really my kind of thing. What's really weird is he looks like the dude from Grounded for Life. The brother.
Yes.
Does anyone know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Like, that's who I would have imagined him to grow up into, but he doesn't look like Slater now. Which is good.
He doesn't.
I don't look like me when I was little either.
Right.
So that's probably good. But I was very surprised, obviously not dressed up in the stoner gear. His face, I was surprised, but I haven't seen him at Dogtown he was in, I want to say. Something else. I don't know, a couple other things, but nothing memorable. And I was surprised at that.
Yeah, like in the mid 90s, I had a lot of Rory Cochrane stock, even though I didn't know I had a lot of Rory Cochrane stock. Like, I love Slater and I love Lucas from Empire Records. So had I known this was the same actor and you told me that he was going to go on to have the career that you just listed, I would have said bullshit. He's going to be bigger than Matt Damon. But yeah, I thought he was incredibly charismatic. I think a lot of people who watch this film probably come away with him. I'm not going to say, I think we just earlier established the main characters are either Mitch or Pink, and maybe it's probably a combination of both. But Rory Cochrane kind of steals the show along with, Matthew McConaughey's character, Parker Posey, as well. You can throw her in there 100%. What about other strongest performances for you, Chloe? We just mentioned Matthew McConaughey. I know I see him on there for you.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey's, you can't not be kind of like, I don't know, respectful, inspired by his story with the film, just because. So everybody was already there at camp, right? Like, he showed up a little later. His role came in halfway through the movie. He becomes that second act kind of like guardian to bring them in, not halfway, but he's not there. And this was honestly, they filmed mostly sequentially. Yeah. They did some reshoots and stuff, but they filmed sequentially, which you don't hear often. Usually you have certain places, but since they had the whole place, they just filmed it as they went. And so Matthew McConaughey showed up, and 7 days into filming, his father passed away. And it's sad. However, you have to be happy because he went doing what we all want to do. He went in the middle of lovemaking. In fact, like a bunch of them went, not even kidding, to the funeral that they had. It was a very small event. A couple of them went, and they told stories about the dad, and the mom even straight up said, he did finish. He finished, so everyone be happy before he died. But like,
Tyrion
that's
would
a
be proud.
Traumatic thing.
Tyrion would be proud.
Yeah. So you talk a little bit about some of the trauma, right? Of like of some of the people that had, other things happen, like the sister passing away earlier that we discussed. Mm-hmm. But this was taken the opposite for McConaughey. It actually influenced a lot of his work. Linklater, like in the film, working with him, like really supported him, and they talked about a lot of it. He talked to a lot of the people on set and different people producing it, and his friends, his actor friends that he became good buddies with on set about it. And like, he was having a discussion basically before they filmed the football field. He was having a discussion, and he said, he was like talking about his father, and he's like, you just gotta live, man. I mean, that's what he would have wanted. He would have wanted us to keep living. And literally Linklater was like, that's it. That's it, man. Keep living. Like, that's literally the film. That is what this film's about. That's what I'm trying to tell. And I think it's just like such a poignant thing, that especially because of the people, he's the exact opposite, right? His career, it took off. He got great roles, and his charisma is just infectiously natural in this, right? He's a gross creep, which is honestly a stand-in for a lot of that generation and our generations too. We all understand that, but he understood it was a bad character, but it was a great character. And he goes on to do the Living speech, and he goes on to have this great career. And you start off with Mitch's baseball game, right? Like he has to go face those guys out there and get his ass just kicked. And he's the sacrifice. He's the first sacrifice. And because he does that, he gets to go in. He gets initiated. But then it ends with the contract, right? It ends on the field when Wooderson says, you got to keep living, man. You just got to keep living. And then Pink says, fuck you. I'm going to go see Aerosmith, coach, and I'm not signing your bullshit. I'll smoke pot when I want to. Thank you very much. I'll fuck girls when I want to. Thank you very much. I'll drink booze when I want to. And I'll go see Aerosmith when I want to. And I think that is just, I don't know. I think that's the movie, you know, that's the whole essence of it. So those performances are so standout, especially because everyone on that football field was stoned. Yeah. Everyone on that field was
like
stoned.
in real life,
yes,
like while the filming. Yeah.
They were stoned as hell. They all were like, all the interviews about that scene, they're like, oh yeah, we were pretty buzzed off. Yeah, it was bad.
Well, and that kind of ties into the like the idea that Eliana, you touched on earlier with the 8th graders leaving the dance, where it's kind of like, you know, you can't come back. You know, you got to keep living. You got to keep going on. I think to a certain degree. And also, just a heads up, that's also the name of Matthew McConaughey's non-for-profit. Mm-hmm. He named he took the non-for-profit and named it after you got, what is it? Keep Keep living, man. Yeah, LIVIN, I think is the name of it. But he borrowed it from that. So yeah, a very cool little full circle thing. What about you, Eliana? What were some of your other strongest performances?
I think I've like kind of talked about some of them before. I agree with the Parker Posey one. Some of mine.
Mitch's button-up shirt.
Yeah, but Mitch's button-up shirt. No, but actually though, like that shirt's amazing, and I actually really
performances.
No, I really want it. It reminds me of that one. Fun. It reminds me of like the album cover for New Order's album, like Power, Corruption, and Lies. I'm like, I want that. I want that shirt. So honorable mention goes to that. But I kind of just agree with a lot of what Chloe said in terms of what the best performances are for me. I also want to give a shout out to, I also like, you know, talking about like the idea of continuing to live and just living in the moment, like the corollary to that, which was Cynthia's speech in the car of like, you know, all the guys are like fucking pontificating, and I mean they're kind of just like masturbating intellectually, but not intellectually, you know, but like verbally, right? She's like, "What is this?" And then and that's it's interesting because then she ends up being what, like paired with Wooderson's character. So I like that moment a lot. And you know, Chloe, you were talking about Mitch being like that sacrifice, and you know, in terms of the legacy of this film. You can see it in a lot of ways in other films, right? Like the school's out moment, right? Where all the papers are flying everywhere. You kind of see that echoed in like films like, what is it? I want to say it's 10 Things I Hate About You, where they have Ayers, Sexy Boy, playing while like the flyers fly everywhere. But like it's just got such a huge legacy. So, you know, like you're talking about he gets invited into the fold, Mitch does. After being initiated through this hazing, and he's like basically, you know, cusp in between 8th grade and freshman year. I'm thinking of like what is like, you know, how that this coming of age film evolves into films like 8th Grade, which came out a lot, much more recently, 2018 or something, which is about an 8th grade girl. And the main character, she's very much an outsider. She gets invited to hang out with seniors in high school. And like, you end up with this scene of like this older boy preying on her. And then you kind of have inklings of that starting to crop up in Dazed and Confused, but it never really gets investigated. And it's kind of played off as like, this is fine and normal. And I'm like, no, why is that senior boy with that freshman girl? What is happening? And I'm like, girl, run. All right.
It's interesting because Chloe did have like, she like, because you had mentioned you like everything that's Mitch and Sabrina, right?
Yeah, I you know what I will say too is like, that is a ship, right? Like I was like, oh, are they gonna like each other the first time I watched it as a youngster? And then that obviously changed, because you're young, you got time. But it is interesting, like the predatory behavior from Wooderson is like, it's something they actually talk about a lot in the interviews and how they were like, yeah, this guy's gross. And I think they did want that to be explored a little bit in some aspects. I think Matthew McConaughey shaped some of that in the end. Like, I don't think they wanted him to look like a total and complete asshole. But there is a line that I want to say it's Simone's character says when he's like when he says his line, the girls keep on getting younger. Simone says, you're going to go to jail someday. As she walks by, which I respect that. I'm like, at least she knows. But it's interesting. Eliana just got me really invested in Hacks. Her and a couple other people got into the show Hacks from HBO. And it's interesting that there's like, I feel like there could have been a story they wanted to tell, or that maybe he quelled, because and this is being cobbled together, I'm sorry for my brain, but we talked a lot tonight about some of these really strong scenes and how some characters, didn't have a cohesive plot beat, whether it was just didn't make the final cut or whether it wasn't written. And I'm curious, when you watch it, that cohesive plot beat finishes for Mitch, for Danny, for Wooderson with these big moments delivered. But for Simone, or for, what is Danny's sister's name? Why can't I remember? For the sister that he's in, or not sister, for Mitch's sister. I'm sorry.
Jody.
Jody. Yeah.
Jody. So like for Jody's plot beats, like her plot beat was standing up to Danny at the end and being like, you have a girlfriend. What are you need to figure your life out. And then they all go to the football field, and there isn't a cohesive end for some of those stories, which is fine, because that's the point also, right? Like, life, man, we got to go figure it out, man, together. And no one knows what's beyond this football gate when we wake up in the morning, high as hell, drunk as hell, hungover, whatever. But like, some of those stories don't get finished. There isn't a cohesive ending for Simone and Jody, right? Like, there's going to be some issue there, as there's a little bit, but it's like, there's nothing.
Yeah. I guess I don't mind it as much for Cynthia, because I'm like, clearly she knew what she wanted.
Girl got her bag.
She knows what she wants.
Yeah.
She wants a wood. Durson.
Yeah, she does. Dancing Sean giving some credence to the to the movie 8th Grade. Also saying, have you guys seen Slacker? Yeah, we talk a little bit about Slacker. Eliana had mentioned that was her kind of gateway into this. She saw that before Days. Chloe has as well. I have not seen Slacker. I need to go back and rewind. I know. I need to go back and watch it. And I've read a lot about it, but I haven't seen it. And it's one of the things I'm going to do for season 2 is like, I need to watch more of like the movies in orbit around the movies that we're talking about. And I try to do that. This, as I mentioned to you guys off air in the email, this week was crazy for me, alone with 2 kids. But yeah, no, I think so I found it interesting when you had mentioned that you were a fan of everything, Tony and Sabrina, because Tony, that's not his name.
Mitch.
That's Mitch. Well, no, not Mitch. Mitch is the 8th grade. No.
Were you not talking about Mitch and Sabrina?
Yeah, I was.
No. Who's it? Mitch is the 8th grader. Who is the senior that Sabrina is kind of paired with?
Yeah, I don't like
Tony.
that one that much. Tony.
Yeah, I don't mind. I kind of actually like Cynthia and Wooderson, but I don't like. Yeah.
Well, it's different stages of maturity too, right?
Yeah.
Like Cynthia is going into her senior year, and she is ready to explore something that's not these men or these young boys, that have driven around all day trying to spank 8th graders. Like she's looking for something else. I get that. Been there, girl. I dated that too. I get it. I had a Wooderson or 2 or 3. Look, dated boys outside my school. Okay.
That's
the boys
right.
in my
Context
school were
matters.
awful.
Context matters.
But like looking at it that way, like there is definitely like for Sabrina, who's like, 14, 15, starting high school, those boys are obviously kind of preying on her. And the Tony thing, like he's the only guy that's obviously like, this is horrible, this is insulting, but he still sits there and lets her do it. So I don't really like that personally. It's just not a favorite. And I don't really like dislike that plot that much or anything or like it. I'm just like, oh, whatever. I'll just skip past that for my other favorite parts.
1,000%. I think in large part my distrust in Tony comes from the movie School Ties. Have you guys seen School Ties?
I have not. No, that one I have not.
Oh my God. There's so many actors from this movie. So Anthony Rapp, Ben Affleck, and then Cole Hauser they're all in it. Yeah, it's for sure. If you like Dazed and Confused, I mean, it's a different period, 1,000%, but you guys need to watch School Ties. Brendan Fraser, also in School Ties, was offered a part in this movie and did not take it. So,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm just going to quickly add, I think it's more of just like, I don't like Tony's character. I think he does a great job with that character. He nails that character. That is exactly what that character should be like. But I just don't like Tony's character. I like Mike's character. Yeah. But I just don't like Tony's character. And I think it's just because I know a lot of Tonys.
I know a lot. I hanged out with Tony. Like I hanged out with those group of kids. And like, so Tony just reminds me of like, as a freshman, a senior nerdy kid I would sit with at lunch that was totally like obsessed with me. And I didn't.
At any age. No, at any age. I'm just like, so, Tony.
He also kind of reminds me of the Encyclopedia Britannica guy. Maybe that's dating me?
Yeah, maybe that's why. I see that too.
Yeah, I never liked that guy.
I literally
Eliana, you were a baby then.
Dressed like
well, actually,
him.
Chloe's younger than me.
Oh, really?
No, I'm not. I'm 80. Yeah, what? No, I'm tiny.
Oh my God, I'm so old.
It's funny. We talked about this before. I was like, oh, I think Tommy thinks we're like older than we are, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna be disappointed.
No, I didn't think you guys were older than you are. I really didn't have a clue, and then just honestly listening to Chloe talking about how she watched it and how she viewed it, I just assumed she was closer to my age.
I'm an old soul.
She's just very cultured and mature.
Very cultured and Dazed and Confused. It is a culture.
I'm
just a babe, just a baby, just a babe.
Yeah.
So there was also this, we didn't really talk about Jason London as one of your strongest performances, Chloe, but you had mentioned in your notes how the kid from Seventh Heaven is in a movie with Jeremy London. Jeremy
London. So okay, hold on. Here's your couple degrees.
Yeah.
The blonde kid from Seventh Heaven that's in this movie, and I'll never know his name, and I don't care. You know who I'm talking about with
Tommy Houston.
Iris? Yeah. Tommy Houston. Thank you. Perfect. So he in this movie. So is Jeremy London's in Seventh Heaven. Right. So Jason London's twin brother Jeremy London is in Seventh Heaven with Tommy Houston. There's your connection.
And Jeremy London is also in Mallrats with Joey Lauren Adams.
Yes.
So there's a lot of really weird things because Adam Goldberg is in Saving Private Ryan with another actor from this movie. There's all sorts of incestuous stuff when you start going into the cast. But the big one for me is School Ties, which brings me to one of my strongest performances, who isn't the strongest performance, but I just want to take a minute to have a Cole Hauser appreciation moment. I'm going to go on a limb and say, anyone here watching Yellowstone?
My parents love it, and they keep trying to get me into it. So if you like it, then maybe I should.
So here's the thing. It was like during the pandemic, we were looking for shows to watch. We watch a lot. We consume a lot of television. So we were watching most everything. We started watching Yellowstone. I actually really enjoyed it, despite what I thought. And I started to develop this like unnatural sexual attraction to Cole Hauser, who plays a character named Rip. So much so that I reached out to my college roommate who lives in the town in Montana where they filmed this. And I was like, dude, are you watching Yellowstone? And he's like, yeah, dude. Like, of course I watch Yellowstone. It's filmed where I live. So I said, oh my God, dude, Rip. Like, he's like, dude, Rip. There's like dudes line up outside of the filming and have signs. Then they'll hold up. They'll be like, hey, Rip, fuck my wife. And,
oh my
just,
gosh.
I'm just going to go out and just, Lita, I'm not that generous. If Rip comes into our house, he's mine. He's 100% mine. I'm not sharing him with Lita. Rip is mine. I'm just going to let you know.
Understood.
So I'm watching this for like a season and a half. And part of me is like, I'm confused because I'm so sexually attracted to this Rip character. And there's a part of me that's like, maybe it's because he seems familiar. Maybe I'm like repressing these feelings I had for someone that, I know in my past. And I'm going and I'm looking. So I'm like, okay, who's this actor? Who plays him? And I see the name Cole Hauser, and I'm like, that is super familiar. Who is this guy? School Ties and Dazed Confused. If you guys were to, he's to me almost virtually unrecognizable, but still somewhat recognizable. I'm going to say this: he probably could have been left out of this movie, and it's totally fine. Like Benny, I don't know if he brings anything to this movie.
Yes, he does.
I don't know.
You need the weed guy.
Is he the weed guy?
He's also the guy at the beginning with the paddle. Again, he's the one
okay,
driving
but this
paddle.
Is ginger representation also.
Fair enough.
Okay, so the ginger part of him, I would say the ginger thing, I knew a couple gingers that did like advanced wood shop, and then like went on to do like welding and stuff at tech centers. So I think he's representative of a certain demographic that needed to be included. We'll give him a pass, Cole Hauser.
Yeah, I mean, I love him.
But he's so ginger.
I love the fact
Why did that happen?
Well, do you know what's crazy about just a casting note? So that character was supposed to be, it was actually going to be Vince Vaughn. And they casted Cole Hauser because Vince Vaughn looks so much like Ben Affleck. And they were concerned that people would confuse the two characters.
They would be dazed and confused about
they would be dazed and confused. So just a little inside info. So yeah, Cole Hauser appreciation moment. God bless Cole Hauser. He's a sexy man. I also want to just talk briefly about, as I said, the casting director, because I think that this movie plays so differently with a different cast. There's a degree that reminds me of the show Game of Thrones, in that a lot of these people are kind of virtual unknowns when they do this, and Game of Thrones casted a lot of the unknowns, in the show. But I was surprised, and maybe it's unsurprising to learn that the casting director was the same guy who casted Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which again, another one of the great teen movies. There's a lot of like almost happens with the casting too. There's a Judd sister who is auditioning for roles. Alicia Silverstone was up for a role, and in large part, in the interviews that you can find pretty available, they talk about one of the things that they benefited from in 1993. Teen movies were just like not in vogue. Nobody wanted to do teen movies. They weren't doing well. So they essentially had their pick of the crop, where, when that documentary is done in like 2003, they're talking about like, if we did this movie today with the budget we had, it probably would suck, because we'd have to get a bunch of like shitty actors, because teen movies are so hot right now. So I thought that was kind of just like a nice, happy cosmic giggle. And for sure, again, as far as strongest performances, it's hard to argue against that. And then Ben Affleck, I mean, super homoerotic. He's very hateable in this movie. In the interviews, he might be the most level-headed person that was on the cast, but I think his performance is just so strong. And there's a Siberian Husky story, that I don't think we can pass up the opportunity to tell.
Yeah, I was really surprised because, like I kind of mentioned earlier, he's kind of the most adjusted in the 10-year interviews of all of them. He was like, yeah, I looked around and wondered why we were all doing this all the time and thought maybe someone should stop us. And I was like, wow, Ben, so responsible. But his irresponsibility came from a very different aspect, which is he got a baby Siberian Husky and he was keeping it in his room. In his hotel room. He would not let anyone come in and clean it, so it stank to high heaven in there. It was so bad. And in addition to that, Rory also had some issues. He would lock his hotel room door. He'd get back and he kept forgetting to put the do not disturb out. So like, but he kept thinking he did. He was like, man, I swear. He'd get home like, it's the hotel room, 6 a.m., 7 a.m. after shooting and partying all night, try to crash or whatever, or get in there midday and try to crash. And he would swear he locked it or swear he put a do not disturb up. And every time someone would come in, so the fifth time this happens, he exploded, right? He was like, what the hell? He's like, why are you in here? And they're like, we're just trying to make sure you're alive, sir. They thought he was like a heroin addict or a meth head, is what they told him straight up. They're like, we just thought you were addicted to drugs and we just had to check on you. So like between Ben Affleck keeping a dog that he obviously could not take care of during shooting this movie where all you're doing is partying for 42 days straight, and between Rory with his hotel room antics, and they pulled many antics. That is like naughty. They would break into the kitchen almost every day, you guys. But they'd get back super late from shoots and break into the hotel kitchen that was already shut down.
That's
having worked in a hotel kitchen, I can't imagine the type of shit that just like brings down the next morning when you have to like show up and you're like, whoa, what happened here?
God damn it. Rory Cochrane was high again.
I feel like I'm piecing something together here in my head because I was going to bring up the tidbit where I found out, apparently, so you were talking about how production was like summer camp. A lot of the actors, a lot of people were just sleeping with one another all the time. And apparently no one wanted to sleep with Ben Affleck. And I'm like, is it chicken or the egg? Is it because like he wasn't like interested in stuff? And now I'm thinking like, is it that no one wanted to go back to the room that smelled like dog piss and dog shit? Because like who wants to fuck next to that?
Right,
and now I'm like, maybe that's why no one wanted to sleep with Ben Affleck.
Yeah, he's like, hey, you guys want to have some Sam Adams back in my room? And then they come back to like, what? They're
like,
fuck?
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Solid theory.
Yeah, we're not going back to Affleck's room, all right, guys. It's fucking horrible in there. I mean, and on the same token of like the cast members hooking up, and also kind of harkening back to the idea of like a predatory, like these relationships between younger women and older men. Shawn Andrews and Mila Jovovich got they went and eloped during the filming of this. She was only 17 at the time of filming. He was in his 20s. Her mom got it annulled later, but
badass mom.
Yeah, go Miss Jovovich. Also
bad choice. That was a bad choice, maybe just for like if you're she was. I mean, I want to add to that. She was also partying really hard. It's like talked about by the cast that. There are a few things I am very sad to relate to in this movie, but this is a meta thing that I do relate to, that I guess she was just like walking around, like they would run out of weed because you couldn't just like go to the store. Right. Like some places you can now, you couldn't just call your dealer and be like, yo, you got an ounce on you or a pound or whatever you want to get for the crew. That was coming from Mexico. They were in Texas. So like when they were out for a couple days. And I guess Mila Jovovich was out there like hounding, like, where's the weed? I want the weed. And like at first they were like, this is just method acting for Michelle, who's always high. And then it was like, oh no, Mila, we don't have any. What don't you get? We're out, bitch. It was that was crazy. So like I'm guessing it was not the choice she wanted to make, is all, as a 17-year-old.
Yeah. Probably better decisions to be had, but also not the only like young starlet to go and get,
Cynthia
eloped. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking of also Britney Spears early on in her life.
Yeah.
Gosh, where was I? Oh, here we go. Yeah, there was one other scene that I'm just blanking on right now for some reason. But yeah, I do have one listener question, and then I have a little game that I want to play before we go, and then we can have Chloe show some of the pictures from her Criterion collection. The question I have is, where does the soundtrack rank on the pantheon of soundtracks for you? So we'll actually start with Eliana here.
I don't think I'm like great at like ranking movie soundtracks. That's the thing. I don't listen to very many. And pay attention to it that much. So high, it ranks high.
Like what movies come to mind when you think of like movies and music?
I only actually really have one. It's for me, it's the Amelie soundtrack, and that's it. That's it. That's the end all be all for me for
I love
movie
that
soundtracks.
soundtrack.
Dancing Sean is for sure going to comment on that. It's
That's
one of his
it.
favorites. Yeah, the
I love
Amelie.
Amelie.
Well, that works. Amelie. So then it's Amelie and maybe Dazed and Confused as a
A
There are
second.
other ones that I
Yeah,
might
a
think
runner-up.
of. I mean, like, yeah, I'd have to think. I don't think it's movie soundtracks.
What about you, Chloe?
I'd have to say that this has got to be, and I don't want to give them actual rankings, but I'll throw a few names out. You got like Blues Brothers, you got The Garden State, you got this, okay? Like those are going to be my three that I'm thinking of for my criteria here. So I will say that it is up there with Garden State and Blues Brothers, and what else? Like Spinal Tap, or yeah, I don't know. Titanic soundtrack is beautiful, but it's not my favorite, if that makes sense.
One of the ones that stands out for me was was the Forrest Gump soundtrack. That was one that was like I was in
good.
I like when I was in 7th grade, there was like 3 albums that you had to own, and one of them was Dookie by Green Day, the other one was Forrest Gump soundtrack, and then like the third was some combination of like the Blue Album or
Yeah.
like a Violent Femmes.
Violent Femmes. There you go.
Yeah. And yeah, so for me, I mean, I don't know. There's also, I mean, I was also really big into hip hop as a kid. So like, I think, there's Judgment Night comes to mind, and then also Above the Rim as like soundtracks that were really, really excellent. Space Jam is also a really sweet soundtrack. I think it's the original Space Jam is a really hard one to argue with. So now I'm going to get into. I didn't put this in the notes because I did want you guys to come into this, a little unknowing. So you guys are experts in A Song of Ice and Fire, as we've kind of established a little bit earlier. One thing we like to do, allegedly, one thing we like to do. We have a couple really good suggestions here. I just want to hit on them. Beavis and Butthead as an underrated soundtrack.
Scott Pilgrim, yes.
Yeah, Scott Pilgrim, another one.
That's a great soundtrack.
I hit them high. But what I want to do is I want to recast this movie, but I want to recast it with characters from A Song of Ice and Fire.
I'm so ready for this. I'm so ready.
Chloe's face. Oh my god.
So we know who's going to go first, but we'll let Chloe have the first pick. I'm not going to do the whole cast. We're just going to go through a couple of characters I have here. How we're going to do this? We're going to let so we're going to move from center to right. So guest first. So it's going to be Chloe, Eliana, and then I'll go. And then if you have a person, or if you have, if you want to weigh in, we're going to allow people to weigh in at the end. We don't have to spend super long on this, but let's first start with Mitch Kramer. You have to cast Mitch Kramer with someone from A Song of Ice and Fire. Chloe, who are you casting Mitch Kramer with?
Jon Snow next.
Okay, Eliana, who are you going to cast as Pink?
Fuck. I was gonna pick either John or Rob.
Rob. Okay, Rob. I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna throw in. Could it be Jaime Lannister? Could Jaime Lannister be
Pink? I thought about that for a moment.
The gold hand, the golden arm. I think there's a correlation there.
You have to be on a redemption arc for that to take place, and
isn't Pink kind of on a redemption arc? Like the way I look at it is, he's like,
but Jaime's not.
Ooh, hot take. But
Pink hasn't done anything that needs redeeming.
Well, there you go.
Right? So
I mean,
you just be like that arc.
We only see him for like a day, right? Because this movie takes place between like May 20. So,
I mean, he lets his friends get away with what they want, which doesn't feel like him, to be fair. Like, I feel like Jaime would be like, all right, cut that shit out. So maybe not. I feel like maybe not a Jaime. What's another good night? Ares Oakhart, right? Like nice and dumb and whatever and handsome.
Yeah. Able to be manipulated. I'm looking for someone who's like struggling between groups. I guess John is a good one for that. I guess
he is fine.
If Eliana, is that who you would mention first?
John or Rob, one of them.
John or Rob, yeah.
They've got similar values.
So I'm gonna go. I'm going to give myself Rory Cochrane as Slater. So who is our Dolores Ed? Is Dolores Ed a good pick for Slater?
Oh, interesting.
Maybe.
I'm having a hard, he's our comic relief. I'm just having a hard time.
Marwin the Mage. No.
Strong Belwas.
No.
Nimble Dick Crab.
It's got. I mean, Dolores Ed is a good one for the funny part, but that's a hard one.
Well, also, hold on. Also, the stories, right? Wait, no. Nimble Dick Crab is good for the stories, right? Because how
Old Nan.
Ooh.
I bet Old Nan gets so high. I bet she smokes sour leaf and she smokes
Yeah.
weirwood leaves, all dried
Old
weirwood
Nan-
leaves or some shit.
Old Nan
is Slater.
Old Nan would be a really, really good Slater. That's an excellent point. So Chloe, Wooderson. I'm giving you Wooderson.
Oh fuck! I didn't even think about this enough. I didn't. I couldn't even fathom getting Wooderson.
Who's our old horny guy? Is it is it the Corbray? Is it the Corbray guy?
No,
Lynn Corbray?
Robert Baratheon.
I'm out here Robert Baratheon, dried up football star, hitting on the young girls, even though he's got to stop. I even was going to give him a little finger, right? Because he's a little bit into the money and having jobs and nice things and cars and shit. And he's like, oh yeah, I get every young girl on the block. So I don't know. I'd say a good mash of those two. Get a job.
Yeah, no, I can't. He was a hard one for me. I mean, I was thinking of Oberyn Martell, maybe perhaps a little bit.
Wait, Theon in Clash of Kings.
Yeah.
Clash of Kings.
Yes.
Theon is Wooderson.
Yes.
Oh
yeah.
Good.
That is really good. Eliana, we're going to give you
getting younger.
O'Banion.
I don't remember which character that fucking was.
Ben Affleck.
Oh, Ben Affleck's character.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. What is the name of one of the bullies at the Night's Watch? Toad or something like that?
Toad or
Alistair Thorne.
Oh, Alistair Thorne actually is a good idea too.
I also think of
I like Alistair Thorne.
He could be anyone in the Mountains group. He could be the Tickler or someone
the Tickler's a really good one. Huh.
Yeah.
Wheeze.
Yeah. He'd be an excellent Wheeze.
Yeah.
So I the next one I'm going to go with, I don't want to give myself anyone too good. I'll fill up the Cole Hauser, Benny, just because I'm gonna. Why not? Why not give my? Because I'm gonna fill him up. Because I want to fill up Cole Hauser.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Rip.
There.
Yeah, Rip. Oh, you mean Rip? So it's got to be someone who's extremely ruggedly handsome.
Okay.
Who also is kind of sadistic, right? Because you as you pointed out, originally I thought he was pretty benign, but then you did point out he was the one drilling the holes in the paddle. So it's maybe I don't know, he's not Oberyn Martell. He's certainly not that. I just want to, I found Oberyn Martell very, Pedro Pascal very sexy as well. So maybe I'm likening him from that route. Could he be a Victorian?
I thought you were going to say Dark Star.
Stupid, but likes brute force.
Actually, no. Victorian's good. Victorian's
That's great.
Good for this one. Yes.
Really good.
Okay. And then Chloe, we're going to give you Darla Marks.
Cersei Lannister.
Oh,
There's no one else. Get on the floor, you freshman bitches. Yeah, that's Cersei. There's no one else that would haze anyone like this. That's literally Sansa's first 3 books.
And then, and then the last one I want to do, I am, where is this actress's name? I'm kind of reluctant to. It's the actress who plays Sabrina. Why is she not coming up on here? But yeah, Sabrina. Let's recast
Kristen
Sabrina.
Hinojosa?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
It feels like a Sansa character, right?
Yes, 1,000%. I almost wanted to give it to Chloe because I thought it was a Sansa slam dunk, but yeah, Sansa 1,000%. and then we're gonna close it out. I'll let you guys pick the next character. Who do you guys want me to? Yeah, Kristen Hinoja.
Oh,
Yeah. Who do you guys want me to pick for my last character? We've used so basically who's available. We could do Adam Goldberg. We could do Joy Lauren Adams.
what about Tony?
Anthony Rapp. So he's not quite Sam, right? Or I mean, like my gut is to say Sam, but I think that's too low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
An intellectual who is somewhat clueless, but not really. He doesn't understand he's clueless, and he likes younger women. So like Pycelle. Is there possible Pycelle? He's a Pycelle vibe.
Interesting.
Is he giving me Pycelle vibes?
Maybe like someone nicer, like Maester Theomore, or like Maester. Who's the one in the Vale right now? Why do I not remember that? Or Maester Vyman and Riverland. I don't know. Like, I just feel like, or who's one of the younger ones at the Citadel? You know,
Pate.
like what? Pate. He could be Pate.
Pate gone.
Like the
You
pig
mean
He
boy.
likes Rosie.
Is it faceless man Pate or real Pate?
No,
Doesn't
real
matter.
Pate. Yeah, doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Maybe he
Doesn't
could be
matter.
whatever you make him. No, I think
Hmm.
Pate's a good one because, you know, all he cares about is his beautiful, sweet Rosie's, life.
Rose.
That
Yeah.
is.
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
no,
I wasn't gonna say it, but my God, Eliana.
yeah, no, that is an excellent choice. Yeah, I mean, I guess I have such a negative. We're gonna have to have you guys both watch School Ties, and then I just need you to secretly, email me back on your thoughts on School Ties, because
Okay.
I think you're gonna view Anthony Rapp through a different lens. And you have to understand that was my first. So I not that it makes a huge difference, but I saw Dazed and Confused having loved School Ties. It was one of those movies that I adored. It came out the year before Dazed and Confused. It has a lot of the same individuals. Again, like I said, some of the same themes. And it explores some of the themes that we kind of taught or like danced around the edges of saying we wanted a little bit more of in this film.
Mhm.
And it kind of digs into those a little bit more deeply. Brendan Fraser plays a Jewish kid who's really good at football, who gets recruited to come play for an Ivy League, and all of his fellow classmates are extremely anti-Semitic, and most of the movie is spent with him trying to hide the fact that he's Jewish. And so when it comes out, it's interesting to see the complete 180 that who he thought his friends were. And so, and one of the main provocateurs or agitators in this is Anthony Rapp. He's like one of the, the big baddies. So that was that's how I met Anthony Rapp. That's how I'll always see him, is through the lens of this character. And it's really hard to just disassociate that when I see this and feel bad for him kind of. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm going to stick with Pycelle, but you guys bring up some excellent choices. And that will bring to an end our recasting of Dazed and Confused. I thought you guys did an excellent job.
Thank you. High pressure, but we had
It
fun.
is,
I was
sometimes,
dazed and confused.
yeah, with the games, I like to, if I'm going to throw them at a guest, I like to do it without a lot of heads up. Sometimes it's too much thought.
Like hazing.
Yeah, it is like hazing. I just hazed both of you, and now I feel
much
guilty.
nicer hazing. It was a much nicer hazing.
I'm gonna have to go on another podcast and talk about how guilty I feel about it later. Last of the Mohicans for soundtrack. Sean points out. Well, that's not the right one. There it is. And then, we have Drunk Ice and Fire says that is
That's Chloe.
That's just me.
That's Chloe.
That's just her.
That's Chloe.
the only YouTube account we have.
That's all. Well, thank you both for coming on. If you're still listening and watching, hit like. Don't forget to subscribe. Our next episode is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be the end of season 1 or if it's just going to be a mid-season break. We're still kind of deciding that, but we are going to take a small break after our next episode, and that just as a reward to those who are still listening, it's going to be Goonies. So we're not going to do a poll. We are covering Goonies. It's a favorite of my childhood, and we're going to have on our co-founder from the TKO podcast, Flynn, her husband, and we're going to talk about that. Maybe one other special guest, undecided yet, but definitely the three of us. And then we're going to take a small break, and we'll let you know when we're coming back. And perhaps New Dad in the hiatus will be something that's dropping for you guys. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys about movies that I really enjoy. This one even more so because it's genuinely one of my favorites, and I got to talk about it with genuinely two of my favorite content creators out there, Chloe and Eliana. Anything else you guys want to plug?
We have a podcast. It's called Girls Gone Canon.
Yeah. And where can they find it? Where can they find it?
Wow,
basically
where can
anywhere.
they find it? Wow. You can find it on. I'm not going to give actually the whole spiel, but you can find us for the most part on Podbean or on Twitter at Girls Gone Canon, twitter.com/Girls Gone Canon. We also have a Patreon if you would like to check us out there at patreon.com/Girls Gone Canon. Again, CANON, 1N.
That's
we
right.
are not launching
Shooting
anything into the
cannons.
sky. We're launching our thoughts.
Yeah, make sure you any podcast streaming platform we're pretty much on. So if you look it up on iTunes, the whole shebang, Google Play, you'll find us for sure. Spotify.
Somewhere there, yeah, on Google. Just it's there.
And then maybe when season 2 comes back, Chloe, you can put in a good word for us with your beautiful husband, and we can get the good folks of Not a Podcast on, perhaps.
I hear that if you throw out the word Kubrick, he'll come running. So.
Ooh, that's the carrot on the stick.
And that is all the help you're gonna get from me. Good luck.
That seems like good help. That seems like pretty good.
That seems like a lot of help.
You can lead a man to water, but you can't make him drink,
Well,
unless hazing.
Unless push him on in there. Just
I'll let the guys come on and haze me. I don't care. That's what I would do for to have those gentlemen on.
God.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you guys so much. I hope everyone listening enjoyed it. And we'll be back in 10 days, week and a half with another episode. Chloe, Eliana, thank you so much. I'll let you guys go. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.